adventurers. Welcome to the stream. My camera's a little far away. Come closer. Please, come. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Hail adventurers and legends. Welcome to another deep dive mission art stream. It's been a while since we have one of these. Every once in a while, I like to do a deep dive into the subject we are drawing. And tonight, today, this morning, whenever you're watching this, welcome. A deep dive means that while I draw, we'll geek out together, learning about the origins of the characters that we're celebrating. By the end, you'll hopefully walk away with not just finished art, but a deeper knowledge and inspiration about the subject. Tonight's mashup is an epic fusion of Link from the Legend of Zelda with the symbiote from the Spider-Man universe, Venom. This is commissioned as a birthday gift from someone who is gifting something that is a lover of both worlds. Okay, so we'll kick things off with a look into Zelda's roots. Thanks to a great video from Game Nerd Legacy. While the video plays, I'll begin the sketch, and so I'll be pretty much silent through it because I'm going to be concentrating on getting the drawing done. However, I will pause and respond if anybody's asking questions or jump them into the stream all the way through. So, yeah, we're gonna do that. Following that, we're gonna take a little break. I'll talk to you guys about where I'm at with the drawing, and then we're gonna continue with a history of Venom. So if you're a fan of Zelda, or if you're a fan of Venom, this is definitely a stream for you. All right? Fantastic. Let's get into here. Let's get this going. Let me get over to the art table here. Boom. Now there, welcome guys. Welcome. All right. Woo! This should be a good one. We haven't done one of these in a while. I'm just making sure my chat window's up. Good. Yeah, we are groovy. Indeed. Awesome. Okay, so I've worked out my layout already. Severe says I love both Venom and Zelda. Well, awesome. Doubly awesome. This should be a lot of fun. It should be a lot of fun. And you might actually learn a couple things about both Link and Venom that you didn't know before. Or you thought you knew. Okay, just getting things set up. I'm just going to grab my art table here. Bring that in so I can get in and trap myself in here. All right. I'm also going to take off my glasses for now, because I don't need them for up close. Turn my hat backwards so that I don't hit the draw or hit my microphone. Hopefully, also the audio level is okay for everybody. Do let me know in chat if I need to increase or change anything. What I am going to do, I'm going to grab these. I'm moving for distance. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start up our deep dive video. Again, this is big, awesome, big congratulations and thank you to Game Nerd Legacy. That's the channel that produced this video. It's a really in-depth and really great video, so I highly recommend it. We're about to watch it together. All right, here we go. Let's pause this music for now, like that, and we'll get this going. All right, guys, let's let's enjoy this together.
The history of the original Legend of Zelda is a tale loaded with innovations, challenges, and mistakes that would shape the gaming industry for decades to come.
You've changed the world!
It's the Legend of Zelda and it's really rad.
Let's take a journey through the game's creation, how the masterminds behind Zelda created a huge open world game alongside another game that would also change everything. We'll dive deep into the real places that inspired Zelda and look at the games that came before it which bear a striking resemblance to it. How Super Mario was almost the hero of Zelda. Why Zelda was a runaway success even though the console it came out on ultimately failed. How the American side of Nintendo found a troubling trend in Zelda that created a dream job for gamers in the 80s. And go over, in detail, the strange to downright baffling translation changes from Japanese to English. And stay for the end, where we'll uncover how The Legend of Zelda can actually give you real-life courage. I'm Kevin, and this is the history of the first, the beginning, the original Legend of Zelda.
We imagined that the fragments of the Triforce would be microchips.
That was a fairy tale.
Hell there, Noisy Cloud. Good to see you, man. Yeah, we're doing Zelda mashed up with Venom. That's right. What if Link got the Venom Symbiote? What would he look like? That is the challenge for today's drawing. Should be a lot of fun. Welcome to the stream, by the way. Let's continue.
I just think relying on magic is taking the easy way out somehow.
And Zelda's like a kind of music you've never heard before.
But then Tezuka-san made a mistake and only used half the data.
And when I first showed an early prototype of the NES version of Zelda, it did not go over well in Japan.
The Legend of Zelda may have been made and released in the 1980s. An era in America of muscle-bound action stars.
Knock, knock.
Spandex, not the superhero kind. A car phone symbolized wealth, and the term wax on, wax off was used way too much. But Zelda's origins actually lie farther in the past. Here we go. The late 1950s. Welcome to Kyoto, Japan, home and birthplace of the Nintendo Company.
Trading card company.
But if you were to venture roughly 30 miles northwest, there's a small rural town by the name of Sonobe. This is where the legend begins. Sonobe rests in a valley surrounded by mountains. One does not have to travel far to discover bamboo forests, rice fields, rivers, and ancient Shinto shrines that look as though they have been pulled straight out of The Legend of Zelda.
It looks so much like the graphics for Zelda, it's uncanny.
Yeah, I said that. It's in this wondrous land that a young boy by the name of Shigeru Miyamoto would spend much of his childhood exploring. His parents made a humble living, but they lacked a television set or a car, but they were comfortable. Young Shigeru's childhood home sported many sliding shoji screen doors, making the home a pseudo-labyrinth. Young Shigeru would stare at those doors and have fun, fantasizing what could lie behind them. Maybe it was a hidden passage to an extraordinary world of adventure.
Noisy asks, symbiotic link is the goal. Yes, so what this is this is a commission for Link. What if he had the symbiote? How would it increase his powers? And so it's a birthday gift for someone who's a big fan of Zelda by someone who's a big fan of Venom. So it's kind of a really thoughtful gift. And so what the idea is we're going to infect Link with the symbiote and do kind of my interpretation of what Link would look like if he had the symbiote power. So we're going to lean a little bit more heavily into Link than the symbiote, so to speak. It's going to be like a symbiote-powered Link, right? Thanks for asking, though.
As a kid, he became fascinated with the idea, what if the ordinary world could be more than it seemed? One day, when he was 7 or 8 and exploring the countryside, he came upon a cave, or a hole. Accounts vary. Peering inside, all he saw was darkness. He wanted to go in, but he was too scared, so he left. He returned several times, each time hoping this time he would enter the damn cave. But nope. Finally, he made his own lantern and marched back to the cave. I really think it was a cave and not a hole, so he entered the cave. Inside, Shigeru stood in awe as the light of the lantern created shadows against the rock walls. He would never forget this, the feeling of courage to overcome fear. Courage, a theme that would live in The Legend of Zelda.
Now, I'm not saying that Miyamoto came up with Zelda right there and then. Rather, the cave and the Shinobi countryside gave him the tools and experience to spark the muscles of creativity within his mind.
Here we are, back to the future, in the past of 1984. While Japanese audiences were enjoying films such as Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Nintendo's video game console, the Family Computer, or Famicom, was well on its way to selling more than 3 million consoles in Japan, with no signs of slowing down, where a now-grown Shigeru Miyamoto, in his 30s, was awarded a whole game development team for creating the hit arcade game Donkey Kong, which saved the American side of Nintendo from the brink of financial disaster. Nintendo's video game department was divided into 3 unique research and development teams, often shortened to R&D 1, 2, 3, and Miyamoto's new team would be aptly called R&D 4, tasked with creating and developing new and innovative video games for the Famicom. Miyamoto was put into a producer role, managing and overseeing the development of games like baseball, tennis, Excite Bike, and Mario Brothers. Just Mario Brothers, not to be confused with Super Mario Brothers. Different game. With each game Miyamoto released, he was learning and honing his skills as a game designer. But things were about to change. Enter the Famicom Disk System, an add-on for the Famicom that would give it greater power in graphics and sound. Miyamoto's next move would be to develop 2 games simultaneously. One, an adventure-type game to be a launch title for the Famicom Disk System, and the other, a final farewell game for the Famicom. It was to be an energetic, athletic-type game that would span across the land, sea, and air, with a supersized character. To accomplish this monumental task, Miyamoto would build the dream team of game designers. The late great game designer Satoru Iwata referred to this team as the Golden Triangle. This trio was about to alter the course of video games forever. One of them was Miyamoto's creative confidant and pixel artist Takashi Tezuka. He entered Nintendo right out of college in 1984. Tezuka didn't even own a Famicom or play video games.
I didn't even know who Pac-Man was.
Got his start on the game Punch-Out, doing some of the pixel art. He would then first work with Miyamoto extensively on Devil World, the only game by Miyamoto that wouldn't be released in the US for decades. A game where the underlying design ideals would become an integral part for the upcoming Zelda, with its top-down view and dungeon maze structure. Its religious iconography, though, of Bibles and crosses, not to mention the title itself, were probably why Devil World would get a no-no in the US. For the third member of the Golden Triangle, didn't even work at Nintendo. He was a programmer, Toshihiko Nakago, originally enlisted by Nintendo to help with ports for Nintendo's arcade games, such as Donkey Kong, to the Famicom. Nakago was part of the computer-aided design tool company, Systems Research and Development, or easier to remember as just SRD.
At that time, I didn't even know that anyone by name of Miyamoto was working for the company. Then he came up to me and said, "We're going to be working on Excite Bike together." Toshihiko Nakago.
There is also a fourth member of the Golden Triangle. As to what are video games without their music? But we'll get to Koji Kondo and his immeasurable contributions to Zelda. Excite Bike and Devil World released at the end of 1984, and by then, Miyamoto, Tezuka, and Nakago would set upon the massive assignment of making 2 games at the same time. Medieval fantasy films of the early 80s had some bright spots, but most were constrained by weak to downright laughable special effects. Action-adventure films, though, were popular,
There's a new sheriff in town.
pulled forth by one particular film that audiences and Shigeru Miyamoto would come to truly adore. Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring the rugged Harrison Ford as archaeologist Indiana Jones, who goes in search of the mysterious Lost Ark of the Covenant. Miyamoto wanted to snag that feeling of wonder and adventure that he got from Raiders of the Lost Ark and turn it into gameplay.
Right. I wanted to bring that sense of adventure to a video game. And people playing computer RPGs back then were bragging about how strong their swordsmen had become and were calling each other at night to exchange information. When I noticed that, I thought it was an interesting scene. Shigeru Miyamoto.
The computer RPGs in question Miyamoto took inspiration from were games like Ultima, and a game that is often cited as Japan's first ever RPG, Black Onyx. Miyamoto liked how you become strong in these games, though he didn't believe the way you played them was fun. Notoriously, Miyamoto has stated his fundamental dislike of RPG systems, feeling they were just too cumbersome. But he knew there were bits and pieces in there he could draw from in RPGs to create what he considered fun. As Miyamoto began to craft his adventure masterpiece, it started out as a much different game than the Zelda we would come to know. The first iteration of the game was a real-time dungeon crawler, aptly called Adventure. There would be 5 mountains, and you would head for the middle of it, enter the dungeon, and fight your way through, then progress to the next dungeon, and fight your way through. Rinse and repeat. More suited for an arcade than a home gaming experience, which makes sense when you learn that the game was not originally intended for the Famicom Disk System. No, it was to be for the arcades. Where in America, the early 1980s role-playing video games were starting to take shape with PC games Ultima and Wizardry. Though these early RPGs were severely limited in graphics and required a steep learning curve, lots of stats, lots of menus, lots of text-based commands to pour through, making them more for enthusiasts rather than the mass market. Ultima and Wizardry's gameplay roots stemmed from the popular tabletop role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. But in Japan, the dice-rolling pencil and paper D&D wasn't officially translated and released until 1985. So, Japan's first era of RPG video games would take on a very different design. From the start of the mid-1980s, the very concept of a role-playing game to the Japanese was unheard of at the time. Until a pivotal game released in 1984 to the Japanese arcades that would lay the groundwork for many action RPGs in the country. That game was Namco's The Tower of Druaga, a maze-based dungeon crawler. You play as the valiant knight named Gil, short for Gilgamesh, and fight your way through floor after floor of enemies, puzzle solving and acquiring items. The game's creator Masanobu Endo was enamored by wizardry and the tabletop Dungeons & Dragons after he encountered them on a business trip to the US and set about making his own RPGs, but was dissatisfied with his first attempt having way too many RPG elements for his liking, so he shifted to a more action-oriented game with light RPG aspects. This became the Tower of Druaga and was very, very popular in the Japanese arcades, thus steering Japan's early RPGs in a more action-oriented direction, rather than the turn-based RPGs of the West. Miyamoto became a big fan of the Tower of Druaga. He even had the arcade cabinet of it brought to his office so he could play it, though he couldn't get past floor 60, so he never finished it. Still, Miyamoto was impressed by the game's maze programming, and he was also intrigued how the game sparked talk in the arcades, with players exchanging strategies and ideas with each other. In the pre-internet world, the Tower of Druaga had created a community of players. They were just sharing notebooks instead of sharing on social media. Miyamoto would remember this for later. Plus, the idea of creating a game in the vein of the Tower of Druaga, when it was such a huge success, would have been smart, business-wise for Nintendo, and Nintendo had new arcade hardware to release it on, called the Versus system. A cheaper, more flexible way of retrofitting Nintendo's arcade cabinets with its Famicom console games, as both had the same central processing unit. The downside being graphics take a hit. At first, the Versus system games were a hit in Japanese arcades. Between 10,000 to 20,000 Versus arcade cabinets were sold in 1984, but the success of the Versus system was short-lived in Japan, and its popularity began a steep decline, causing Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi to scale back Nintendo's coin-op arcade division and focus on where most of the money was being made, the Famicom. This may be one of the reasons Miyamoto's adventure games shifted away from its arcade style. And as Nintendo focused more on the Famicom, Miyamoto's ideas of game design shifted as well, from the fast-paced quarter-popping high-score arcade fun to games more suited for the home environment. Great strides on the RPG scene were also being made on Nintendo's biggest rival to the Famicom, the fledgling PC market, with the NEC PC 8801 or the MSX computers, where games like Dragon Slayer, Hide-A-Lide, and Courageous Perseus added more hack-and-slash mechanics to the genre. Keep in mind, we are still years away from Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy releasing, which would revolutionize the Japanese RPG. After playing these pre-Zelda early action-adventure RPGs, one can start to see the genius of Miyamoto's game design and his team, as Zelda would create a much more immersive, polished, and streamlined experience than anything that came before it, to create an adventure unlike any other.
We first set up the rules, and then we make the best character to appear on the game system. And then finally, we think about the whole game story which will be best suited to the game system and the game character. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Rolling into February 1985, after doing a jump experiment with a square block for the other game that Miyamoto and the team were working on, they went on to create the basis for what was to become The Legend of Zelda. Many discussions were had around the table between Miyamoto, designer Tezuka, and programmer Nakago as to what this game could actually be on this new and improved Famicom disk system. At their disposal was more memory, better sound, and the ability to save your game. Because before that, the only way to save your game was through the dreaded password system, or the games just didn't save at all and you start at the beginning, every time. That's why people would just leave their systems on overnight. Miyamoto jotted down a bunch of ideas on the whiteboard. Nakago and Tezuka copied them into design documents. In this document here, it shows all the different goodies the hero can get: arrows, candle, sword, and so much more, as well as the enemies. The number of squares they take up indicate their size, from small to large.
I thought that we should take advantage of the disk system's ability to rewrite data by making a game that allowed two players to create dungeons and then explore each other's creations. We designed that game, and the overall response was that playing through the dungeons was the best part. Shigeru Miyamoto.
After that, the game returned to being a single-player experience, with dungeons now as the primary focus. To test their ideas, they utilized the Family Basic, an add-on for the Famicom where you could learn basic computer programming, because it provided a keyboard. It only came out in Japan. Sorry, rest of the world. In Family Basic, they built a prototype dungeon entrance, seen here on a CRT television. No flat screens in the mid-80s. This is how you were going to start the game. These dungeons would be labyrinths, filled with enemies, hidden passages, and an array of weapons and items you could find to aid you in your quest. The many-room labyrinth-style design was inspired by the numerous shoji screen doors laid out in the childhood home of Shigeru Miyamoto. They designed the first 6 dungeons on a 16 by 8 block layout. To save space, each dungeon fits together, like puzzle pieces. Where you see empty boxes is stored data for secret treasure rooms or hidden passages. Each dungeon was named after the shape they made, such as the eagle, the lion, or the lizard. See, it looks exactly like a lizard, right? Right. Finding your way through these big dungeon mazes could be challenging. So to make it easier, plus reward you for your exploration efforts, enter 2 items. The map. Finding it reveals the layout of the dungeon. Find the compass and it tells you where the main treasure lies, which will be guarded by a big bad boss. Bosses of each dungeon will be big monsters, requiring a special tactic to defeat. Mostly this meant finding its weak spot or The item, it was weak too. In addition to the action RPGs, there was another type of genre becoming big in Japan with the 1983 release of Portopia Renzuko Satsujin Jiken, or Portopia Serial Murder Case, a text-based adventure game. In it, you're trying to solve a murder. The whole game is played out through text commands. Portopia was a mega hit and led to a slew of other companies releasing text-based adventure games. Miyamoto was dissatisfied with the idea of all your in-game actions being done through menus and text commands. He wanted to do what he called a live game, where you would do everything in real time, on screen.
Hey there, Stephanie. Welcome to the stream. We're doing a mashup of Link from Zelda with Venom, the symbiote. This is a deep dive stream. We haven't done one of these in a long time, so we're getting deep into the history of the making of the first Legend of Zelda game, and then we're going to be jumping into a history of the symbiote, Venom. Welcome to the stream.
No menu, well, at least as few menus as possible.
We basically decided to do a real-time adventure game. No one wants to do physical things like pushing and pulling by selecting them from a menu. If they're going to push something, they want to put some force behind it. Takashi Tezuka.
In early discussions for the game, the team debated whether or not to use the Zapper, a gun add-on for the Famicom, used in games such as Wild Gunman and Duck Hunt. Not everyone had one, so they decided against it, which meant we were gonna play it on the controller. Keeping with the action combat of its dungeon crawler origins, they wanted to make it fast and responsive, as well as easy to execute and understand. A button was to attack. B button was to use whatever item or other weapon you may need. The Tower of Jiraga's combat has a learning curve and can be tricky to understand at first, or highlights different stances where you have to switch between attack, defense, and magic. And sometimes, by the time you switched, you're already dead. Miyamoto and team made attack pretty straightforward, very much in the vein of the Tower of Jiraga. If you face forward, your shield will do the shielding, as it's supposed to do, blocking incoming projectiles. But if you're attacking or facing away, well, now you're left open to harm. This creates the strategy for the fights. Miyamoto wanted you to be able to move and slash diagonally, but the hardware limitations killed this idea. Oh well, maybe for a sequel. With each screen being on a square-based tile grid, your attacks were limited to a foursome. Up, down, left, and right. Miyamoto wanted to make sure you saw the sword and shield in your hands, so they were designed to be big. Extra big. Not that big. Ah, just right. Having seen other text adventure games as they got quite big in Japan, Miyamoto felt too many puzzles relied on dialogue to be solved. So Miyamoto pushed to have less reliance on dialogue and instead have you solve and uncover the game's mysteries through action, stressing the live feeling. Miyamoto wanted less menus. Keep the action and gameplay on screen as much as possible. Granted, there would still be a menu. The hardware only allowed them to do so much. The menu screen, though, would be mostly for switching between items and weapons. Therefore, the hero would have an arsenal of items, upgrades, and weapons that you would have to find and discover throughout your epic journey in the dungeon depths. Again, with keeping that live feeling, Miyamoto demanded that the in-game items do more than just damage enemies. Bombs would also demolish walls, leading to secret areas or shortcuts. Then there was the candle, to burn evil foes but also light up dark rooms. A boomerang for stunning enemies, and getting hard to impossible to reach items. And the bow and arrow, used to shoot enemies and, well actually that's their only use. But it is very useful. One thing to notice is there's not much magic in the game, if you think about it. Miyamoto's disdain for magic has been well documented.
It's not that I dislike it, you see. I just think relying on magic is taking the easy way out somehow. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Which explains why there's no real magic system in the game. Later in the game you get a magic wand which gives you a nice and handy projectile. Your sword can shoot a magic-like missile if and only if you have full life. It pays to be healthy. But as the team continued forward, painstakingly designing the dungeons, they couldn't help but feel that they wanted to explore the areas outside the dungeons. And as a wise man once said,
"You've taken your first step into a larger world."
There is some agony in creating something with limitations, but if I can do whatever I can imagine, there would be no limits, and that might be even greater agony. Shigeru Miyamoto.
For all the work Miyamoto and his crew put into designing the dungeons, they still couldn't shake this feeling of wanting to explore the area above the dungeons. And so the game would become even bigger. For the next 6 to 7 months, the team would divide their time building this epic game, dubbed Adventure, and this other, athletic jumping game. For Adventure, they went to work on the above-ground sections. To design this vast overworld, Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka sat down one day. Miyamoto on the right and Tezuka on the left. With one long sheet of paper, the duo began to draw, working their way towards the center. They sketched out trees, rocks, graveyards, forests, and a colossal lake, and much, much more. They finished it all in one sitting. One long sitting.
If you look closely, you can tell a marker was used to make small dots. These are rocks, and these are trees. And you can see Miyamoto-san's personality. At first he's making individual dots, but as he gets tired of it toward the top, he just fills in a bunch of space. Toshihiko Nakago.
Like the hefty-sized dungeon maps, the overworld was also built on a 16 by 8 block layout. They gave the overworld blueprint color, and then laid tracing paper over it to sketch out item locations, enemy placements, and dungeon entrances. The map would continually be adjusted, then readjusted, then adjusted, and readjusted yet again, changing things such as where items and enemies are, all in the name of a better gameplay experience.
There's a place near Kobe where there's a mountain, and you climb the mountain, and there's a big lake near the top of it. We had gone on this hiking trip and climbed up the mountain, and I was so amazed. It was the first time I had ever experienced hiking up this mountain and seeing this big lake at the top. And I drew on that inspiration when we were working on the Legend of Zelda game, and we were creating this grand outdoor adventure where you go through these narrowed confined spaces and come upon this great lake. And so it was around that time that I really began to start drawing on my experiences as a child and bringing that into game development. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Miyamoto wanted to elicit those same feelings in you of wonder and discovery as he had growing up. That's why he often describes the game as a miniature garden, or like traveling to a new city for the first time, which harkens back to his days in Kanazawa, where he went away to college. And Miyamoto knew rewards were key, sometimes literally a key, for your exploratory efforts, whether it's warp zones or burn trees with a candle. Miyamoto originally wanted the candle to burn bigger trees, but that turned out to be way too much graphical power for the Famicom disk system. In Dungeons & Dragons, there's lots of stats and numbers to comb through for character progression. I mean, just look at the character sheet in D&D, which is all well and good in a pencil and paper role-playing game. This kind of number-filled stat progression was a no-no for Miyamoto. He was not a fan of all these stats and numbers. In his adventure game, the aim was to simplify it and to hide it. No grinding to level up, no experience points, and for your life, instead of hit points, you would have heart containers. Completing a dungeon would always guarantee you gained another heart container to help you live longer. They would also be scattered about the overworld for you to find. The team did, though, have a debate on the heart containers. With the memory limitations of the disk system, it also limited the number of items you would be able to carry in the game. This worried Nakago and Tezuka that there weren't enough items in the game. One day when Miyamoto was not there, Nakago and Tezuka spent the whole day discussing the possibilities of dividing the heart containers into quarters, as to make up for the game's lack of items. The heart containers were not split in the end, but maybe it's a good idea for a possible sequel? Wink wink.
The game eventually became more and more puzzle-oriented, to the extent that there were times when I wondered if it wasn't an adventure at all anymore. Sure enough, those were the times when I started worrying about whether a real-time adventure game would be interesting or not on its own merit. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Would players keep going, or quit when they couldn't figure out a puzzle? Would they just give up when they got lost and had no idea where to go? Miyamoto constantly worried about these things. He did realize some of the puzzles were tough to complete, but make them too easy, and that kills the fun too. It's time to commence the next phase of Miyamoto game making 101, meaning it was time to add in an intriguing story, lore, and a cast of lovable characters, and it just so happens Miyamoto already had someone in mind to lead this adventure.
It's me, Mario!
If you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel as it really helps out a small YouTuber like myself against the grand YouTube algorithm gods. And now back to the cancelled Adventure Mario. Adventure Mario. Or was it Death Mountain? Or was it just to be called plain old Adventure?
Hell there, Icelander. Good to see you. Welcome to the stream. We're doing a mashup of Link from The Legend of Zelda and Venom, the symbiote from the Spider-Verse.
Well, at one point or another, the game had one of those titles. Mario was a strong contender to be our playable hero, but Miyamoto's team was not sold on the idea of using Mario. They weren't even sure they wanted to use him in the other running jumping game they were working on too. Miyamoto was fine with using him, as he would be. Mario was Miyamoto's beloved creation, which he first designed for Donkey Kong in the arcades. Miyamoto dreamed of Mario appearing in all his games. By this time, Mario had already appeared as a referee in Punch-Out, and a referee in tennis, a golfer in golf, a construction worker in Wrecking Crew, and he makes a cameo appearance in Pinball, to name a few. Not to mention they had just used him in Mario Brothers. The team wondered if Mario had already been in too much. Co-director and designer Takashi Tezuka was determined to get to the bottom of this Mario debate. So, he headed next door to the head of sales and marketing division, and asked the guy to see the sales figures on the Famicom and its games. Keep in mind, this is still Tezuka's first year at Nintendo. Things were different in those days, so I don't recommend trying this today if it's your first year at Nintendo. Just saying. Tezuka saw that Mario Brothers, which was already a year old, was still selling quite well.
Right. I thought, this Mario is pretty popular. I recall that I mentioned to Miyamoto-san that Mario was selling consistently well, and he said, Mario seems like the way to go.
Mario was a go, but not for the adventure game. Mario would go to the other super running jumping game they were working on. A new character would be designed for Adventure Death Mountain, working title of whatever it's going to be. Another reason Mario wasn't quite right for their adventure title was the new ability on the Famicom Disk System that enabled you to type in your own name. Miyamoto liked how connected players were to their characters in RPGs, and being able to name your own character really helps with this. But Mario already had a name. Now, Mario may not have had much of a personality at that time, but he did have a persona, which defeats the purpose of linking you to your character. So Mario was probably best left in the other game, because they were giving your player character a big sword and a shield, and they needed to make sure the hero's design was distinguishable from those large weapons. With the limited graphical ability of the disk system, the character could only be 3 different colors. They thought of a character with big ears and a long hat. A hat removes the problem of animating hair. Notice Mario also has a hat? The ears and long hat reminded them of an elf-type character. Then they made the connection to Peter Pan. Miyamoto loved Disney films, so he and the crew began to take inspiration from Peter Pan. More so the Peter Pan from the Disney films, rather than the original novel of Peter Pan written by J.M. Barrie. Takashi Tezuka would design the pixel art for the character. In early concept drawings of the hero, he was right-handed, but to help with the pixel art for in the game, his sword had to be switched to his left hand. Miyamoto felt the green colors worked well against the many forests you'd be adventuring across. The game originally was going to take place in the past and in the future, so Miyamoto called him Link, and he was to be your link to the past and
Back to the future!
Link would go on a quest in search of missing microchip pieces.
When we started designing The Legend of Zelda, we imagined that the fragments of the Triforce would in fact be microchips. It had to be a video game that would take place in both the past and the future. As the hero...
Hell there, Elizabeth. Welcome to the stream. Welcome. We're doing a deep dive today.
Made the link between them, we called him Link, the Link in English. But in the end, Link never went to the future, and it remained a heroic fantasy game. We can even say that there was absolutely nothing futuristic. Shigeru Miyamoto.
This would make the pint-sized Link instead be your link to the game, literally, figuratively, symbolically, and metaphorically. And considering you type in your own name, you could say your name links to him, though you only see your name at the beginning, and it also acts as your title to your save file. Still, we have to remember that back in the mid-1980s, The ability to type in your own name was a new concept, and way cool, especially to kids, even young tree huggers like myself back in the day. You would have up to 3 different save slots, so up to 3 different links technically, and it seems Nintendo really considered each of the 3 slots a character, because to delete one you have to go into kill mode. To delete him is to kill him. That's dark. The US version would change this to elimination mode, probably because the idea of kill mode was not kid-friendly enough. With the futuristic storyline out, so too was the microchips Link was searching for. To replace them would be triangles of mystical power. It was called the Power Triangle in an early build of the game, but later translated to the Triforce. Tri means 3, but there are only 2 in the game, the Triforce of Power and the Triforce of Wisdom, but they are triangles, and when broken up they become smaller triangles, so the name still fits. There eventually will be a 3rd Triforce of Courage, but that's not going to show up until the sequel. To name this new Fantasyland, they came up with the name Hyrule, feeling it fit well in this medieval fantasy setting. But now, since it was going to be strictly a medieval fantasy game, Miyamoto knew he wanted to call it The Legend of... well, something. He was having a tough time figuring out what comes after The Legend of. Then the PR planner suggested an illustrated book that would have Link rescue a princess who was a timeless beauty with classic appeal.
Oh, my head.
And her name was Zelda. The storybook idea Miyamoto wasn't into. But the name Zelda... he really liked that name. Zelda comes from Zelda Fitzgerald, wife of author F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote such famed novels as The Great Gatsby. Miyamoto asked the PR planner if he could use the name, and the planner said that would be fine. So Miyamoto went about incorporating Princess Zelda into the story. Then it would be up to you, yes you, the gallant hero, to save her from the clutches of evil. Not an uncommon theme in that time. The Tower of Druaga had Maiden Key that you must save from the evil demon Druaga. Same goes for Hydelide, the Princess Anne. But also, the idea of saving someone you care about or a beautiful person is a strong, easy concept to grasp, which works great in early video games where limited graphics left little room for complex storytelling. Typically, video games at the time tended to be titled after the hero or the villain of the game, but there are exceptions to every rule, and Miyamoto decided to be the exception, and titled the game after the heroine. And so we have The Legend of Zelda. Now, every hero needs a villain. In early design documents, Zelda's bad guy was referred to as Hakai, short for Cho Hakai, a name that comes from the 16th century Chinese novel, Journey to the West, which is about the infamous Monkey King and his mystical adventures, which is very well known and popular throughout East Asia. In Japan, many famous shows, movies, and anime have been based on Journey to the West. Chohakai is the Japanese name for Jubaji, a major character in the book, who is often depicted as a hideous cross between a man and a pig. We can see in early concept drawings of him, they stuck to the idea of creating a monstrous pig-like figure. At some point in development though, his name changed to Ganon, which is of Irish origin, meaning fair-haired or fair-skinned. Though that's probably not why they chose the name. Probably more along the lines of it sounded like a cool villain name that just fit. In this game, Ganon is spelled with 2 N's, like in the word canon. But then if you go to the game's instruction manual, his name loses 1 N. Ganon's official spelling would eventually conform to the G-A-N-O-N, but that wouldn't happen for years. And thus, with the characters in place, the story of legend would go...
Many years ago, Prince Darkness Ganon stole one of the Triforce with power. Princess Zelda had one of the Triforce with wisdom. She divided it into 8 units to hide it from Ganon before she was captured. Go find the 8 units, Link, to save her.
And with that, English teachers around the world cringe. Not the best use of proper grammar, but this is actually what it is in both versions of the game, English and Japanese. If you're curious as to why English words are in a Japanese game, well, in Japan, finding English words is quite common. They have this attractive appeal, kinda in the same way Asian characters are often seen in American tattoos or clothing. Also in Japan, English is a mandatory subject taught in school, though not enough for them to learn it fluently. but the Japanese can recognize certain English words. Notice that some words are highlighted. Also, the colors are very specific. The Triforce is blue, while Ganon and Zelda are in red, and Link is green. This helps let you know what words to focus on, even if you didn't understand the whole passage. Many Famicom games would have English in them, to the point where it was actually expected from Japanese audiences. In the book Legends of Localization by Clyde Mandelin goes way more into detail on this. It's a great read if regional Zelda differences interest you. 1980s video games had such rudimentary graphics that often the only way to convey the game's story and tone was through the box cover or the instruction manual. To flesh out the story for the game's instruction manual, Keiji Terui was hired. He was a screenwriter for anime shows such as Dr. Slump and Dragon Ball. In Zelda's instruction manual, we get our first glimpse of the character Impa, Zelda's most trustworthy nursemaid, who Link saves from a gang of Ganon's cronies. And she imparts, get it, Impa imparts, on Link that he must find the 8 pieces of the Triforce, stop Ganon, save Zelda, and save the whole kingdom of Hyrule. No pressure. The game begins after your meeting with Impa, so she's not anywhere in the actual game. There is a letter you can find that you can give to the old woman so she'll start selling you items. That letter is supposed to be from Impa, but any remnants of what was on that letter is not in the game. So sorry, Impa. But maybe you'll be back for a sequel, or 2, or more. The overworld in The Legend of Zelda is quite devoid of people. Most are hidden in caves, from this old man to that old man, to this other old man. Oh, and then there's that old man by the sea. Did you notice the difference between the old men? If you look closely, the old men in the overworld have a slight difference when compared to the old men in the dungeons. The dungeon old guys have bigger beards and hands, while the overworld older gentlemen have more full robe sleeves. But the most interesting difference is the dungeon old men have pointy ears, like Link. So by today's Zelda lore standards, they are Hylian. But the differences are subtle, so you can see where I'm going with this. Limited graphics cause limited population and many reused character sprites. I do realize, lore-wise, Ganon and his minions are spread across the land, so the people of Hyrule had no choice but to hide in caves. 2 other cave dwellers are the Old Woman and the Merchant, both of which are reused and reused again. Oh, and yeah, there's Zelda herself, but she only shows up at the end. The very end. No towns or villages in this game. One of the more complex overworld enemies, I'm talking from a lore standpoint, is the main henchman of Ganon, the Moblins. Later games would change the name to Moblins, but in the beginning, they were Moblins. The Japanese pronunciation is Moriburins, which is a combination of 2 words. Mori, in Japanese, means forest, and Gorobin is the term for goblin, making them respectively forest goblins of a sort. What's unique about the Moblins, in addition to finding them and fighting them in the forests of the overworld, is you can also find them in certain underground caves, where an early prototype of the game had them saying, "I'll give you this, so leave me alone." But in the final game, this changed to the now infamous, "It's a secret to everybody." Then you get money. The Japanese translation is a more mundane common phrase, translating closer to, "Now keep it a secret from everybody." But the US's "it's a secret to everybody" would become a memorable enough line, and memeable enough, to be referenced in other Zelda games. The man behind this line? Miyamoto. See, Miyamoto had grand ideals of being on par with the skills of copywriters, so he wrote this line trying to convey a lot with saying very little, which gives the line a double meaning. It's a secret that you shouldn't tell anyone about, but it's also a Moblin, an enemy. So giving you rupees is a betrayal to all Moblin kind, so don't tell other Moblins. Needless to say, Miyamoto would stick to game design from here on out. Fun fact about rupees, the name of money in the game. Many think the name stems from the currency in India, also called rupee, but Miyamoto has admitted that the name comes from ruby. You know, the gem, the stone. And he thought that the name sounded cute. With much of the gameplay, story, and design in its place, it was time to bring in the 4th member of the Golden Triangle. I guess that makes him a golden diamond now. This diamond in the rough was about to create one of the most iconic themes. Oops, not that iconic theme. Although he did create that iconic theme, it's gonna be a different iconic theme.
The music, or sounds, in the old days was just terrible. Because the pure engineers and programmers, who had no knowledge at all of music composition, had to make music and sounds for the games. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Nintendo was forward-thinking by hiring game designers in a time when game designers didn't exist, Shigeru Miyamoto being one of the first. The next step was to hire a composer for video games. Miyamoto, being a casual musician himself, had created the music for Donkey Kong. But they knew they needed someone who specialized in music. So Nintendo put up recruitment ads at the local colleges in hopes of finding a music composer. By doing this, they caught the eye of one Koji Kondo, and he became Nintendo's first employee hired for the specialized role of composing music for video games. Kondo would get his start at Nintendo composing music for the arcade hit Punch-Out! And Versus Golf. As Famicom sales began to flourish, Kondo was moved to Miyamoto's R&D 4, where he worked on the music for Devil World with Akito Nakasuka. But his biggest breakthrough was about to come. Double time, for he was tasked with composing the music for two games, Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. He did practice his compositions at home on his keyboard, but there were no ways back then of converting his keyboard playing into data. No MIDI either. Instead, he had to type the music notes manually into the computer. He had begun studying computer programming when he started at Nintendo, which helped immensely. Playing both games, Kondo would try to find the music best suited for each game.
With Zelda, I was trying to enhance the atmosphere of the environments and locations. The sound of Mario is kind of like popular music, and Zelda's like a kind of music you've never heard before. So I tried to incorporate many different types of music to create an otherworldly feel. Koji Kondo.
Kondo would sometimes receive pretty simple requests from the team. As an example, in Zelda, from co-creator Takashi Tezuka, which he would write to Kondo simply saying, fanfare, sparkly, or title crawl. Tezuka, looking at his own request many years later, would admit,
how could he make anything based on this?
Kondo's next step is to reach out into the world of music, searching for inspirations and references, listening to all kinds of melodies that could fit the general aesthetic of the game. Once he gathered a solid understanding of the music for the game, and he's ready to begin writing, he then stops listening to all that music, for fear that his music would sound too similar. For Mario, he kept the music bright and fun, and easy to remember chord progression. For Zelda, he toned down the brightness and incorporated a variety of musical styles. One musical influence comes from the British rock band Deep Purple. Kondo was in a cover band in middle school, and some of the music they played was from Deep Purple. In their song April, you can hear some of Zelda's influence. Let's listen to Zelda's overworld theme. Then, if we ramp up April to 1.5 times the speed, we can more easily hear the influence. Now let's move over to Zelda's dungeon theme. Now let's move back to April. Hear the similarities? This is a process known as interpolation, a very common technique used among musicians, using a melody as a tool to build their own unique music, which means this is not stealing. Anyone who tells you it is wrong. And you should send them this video, so I can set them straight. Next, in his search for musical inspiration, Kondo found French composer Maurice Ravel's Bolero. It's from Bolero that we can glean the underpinnings of Zelda's score. Kondo went even as far as to use Bolero in the opening title crawl for the game. Maurice Ravel had lived and died a long time ago, so they assumed that the music had fallen into public domain. A mistake that would come back later to haunt them. Yeah, we're gonna get to that. From Bolero is where we can extract much of what Kondo built the Zelda sound from. Bolero's mixing of genres, the classical jazz and the Latin. Zelda does much the same with classical music and folk. The Latin influences would arrive, more so though in the sequels. One of the unique aspects of Kondo is his use of ostinato in Zelda. What is an ostinato? It's a pattern that repeats. Bolero also utilizes this musical technique as well. And with the limited memory at the time for video games, melodies were going to repeat. A lot. Where most game music would play through, then abruptly return to the beginning, having no concern for a smooth transition. A good example is the theme from Castlevania. Not to say Castlevania's theme is bad, only that its structure is linear. Kondo, on the other hand, utilizes note variations that are similar to each other. Think of them like notes that are cousins, then putting them out of order, and this will hide the transition as the melody goes back to the beginning. Where this really helps you is your immersion within the game, and you don't even notice it. The dungeons, on the other hand, would be a stark contrast to the heroic music of the overworld, called respectively the Underworld theme. It's just a mere 19-second tune, but effective in creating tension and dissonance, with lots of sounds hitting you at once, and Kondo uses some slick tricks to accomplish this. One trick is how he creates reverb with such limited sounds. If you don't know what reverb is, it's this is reverb. By playing every second note on the second wave channel and then being so close to each other, they almost overlap, creating a reverb effect, so it feels like you're in a cavern or, dare I say it, dungeon. Now, let's talk about the Devil's Interval. In music theory, it's simply called the tritone. It's only 2 notes, but it can be used to create great tension and unease, such as in the film Jaws. Or Halloween. Kondo puts the tritone to good use in the final dungeon of the game. It's a theme that rides a thin line between noise and music, but you could say its chaotic progression is what makes it work. All in all, The Legend of Zelda doesn't have much music. Depending on who puts the soundtrack together, you can listen to every tune in 7 to 9 minutes. Yet, these tunes will go on to last for decades to come.
I've been involved with Zelda since the first game, released on the Famicom Disk System in Japan. That was a very tough project, since I had to create brave, gallant music through a small number of sounds, and it took a long time to complete. Generally, my style is to present a composition for feedback when it's complete, not ask for ideas along the way. So when I presented my ideas to Mr. Miyamoto for that first Zelda game, he fortunately called for only one change: the music for Link's Warp. I had to recreate that sound several times before it got the green light, since it was very challenging to express the warp so simply. Koji Kondo.
It's a very short tune that some would slot under a sound effect rather than music, but back then Kondo was responsible for all the sound effects as well. Which is why many consider the FDS version of The Legend of Zelda to be the superior version, sound-wise, compared to that of the cartridge version that would come out later in the US. Let's have a listen. For a time, producer Shigeru Miyamoto and his team thought they would finish Zelda first, before the running jumping game they were also making, eventually to be named, you guessed it, Super Mario Bros. Woohoo! But Super Mario was supposed to be their last game for the original Famicom, before the release of the Famicom Disk System, which Zelda was to be a launch game for. So they decided best to finish up Super Mario Bros. First. And after many long days, they finished Super Mario Bros. And Shigeru Miyamoto allowed the team to celebrate. for about 3 hours. Then it was back to work to focus on all Zelda all the time until it was done. They would snatch up the programmers from Super Mario Bros. In a final push to finish the game. 2 of these new additions were Yes and
Oh, good night, Stephanie. No worries, no worries. Take care. I know it's late for you right now. Sleep well.
Ari Soejima, and the mysterious programmer known only as Ai Marui. Some think that Ai Marui is Nintendo developer Tetsuo Nishiyama, based off evidence from other games. Since Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda were made at the same time, the goal was to make them opposites. Mario has a side view. Zelda has a top-down view. Mario, linear progression. Zelda, open world. Mario can jump. Link cannot. Mario is on a quest to save a princess, and Link is also on a quest to save a princess. Mario's game takes place in the fantasy world of the Mushroom Kingdom. Link's takes place in the fantasy world of Hyrule. Yeah.
The stories of Mario and Zelda titles have always been supplemental to the actual gameplay. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Okay. In that case, we'll just say gameplay-wise, they are opposites. The team referred to ideas for each game as Mario ideas and Zelda ideas. Zelda even lost one of its ideas to Mario, the fire bars. They were originally supposed to be for Zelda, but they couldn't fit them into Zelda, so they put them in Super Mario Bros. The team's grand ideas constantly ran up against the graphical limitations of the Famicom Disk System. An example is at the level 7 dungeon entrance, there's a small body of water where you must use the recorder so the water will drain and reveal the dungeon entrance. Miyamoto originally wanted you to be able to see the water drain out, but hardware limitation just wouldn't allow it. So instead, they just had the color change from blue to match the sand. Sometimes mistakes can lead to great things, as Takashi Tezuka found out after he handed in the in-game calculations he made to programmer Toshihiko Nakago.
Right. Tezuka-san said, "I did it," and brought this to me. I created the data exactly in line with it, but then Tezuka-san made a mistake and only used half the data. Toshihiko Nakago.
Yeah, oops. Tezuka had miscalculated the memory, meaning they still had a whole bunch of memory left over. To put it to good use, they made a second quest. You would start it after finishing the game for the first time. But this time, enemies would be harder. Dungeon layouts, their entrances, items, and weapons were all changed to different places. There would also be a new type of enemy, the Red Bubble, which can curse Link, making him unable to use his sword. To dispel this, you must find a blue bubble and touch them. Luckily, blue bubbles tend to be found near red ones. Dungeons 1 through 5 were laid out in the form of a letter.
Yeah.
Put them all together and it spells Zelda. For those seeking a challenge, the second quest is for you. There is a secret way you can just go straight to the second quest if you so desire. Just name yourself Zelda. After long hours of diligent work, Miyamoto and crew finally got a prototype of the game working. And then when they tested it out, and it, well...
And when I first showed an early prototype of the NES version of Zelda, it did not go over well in Japan. People were confused. They didn't know their objective. They didn't know how to move from stage to stage. They couldn't even solve the puzzles. A lot of people said, look, why don't you just make one way through the dungeon? No multiple paths. But, of course, I ignored them all. Rather than making it easier for players to understand, I decided to take their sword away from the very beginning. You do that, then you know what you've got to do. See, I did this because I wanted to challenge him to find that sword. Because I knew that they would think about these problems. They would think before they go to sleep, how am I going to do this? Or maybe as they were riding to work in the morning. And at the same time, I wanted them to talk with other Zelda players and exchange information. Shigeru Miyamoto.
You would start the game weaponless, but there's a small cave opening just above you at the start, seemingly like the dark cave Miyamoto had to courageously enter as a child. If you enter it, you'll discover the sword, with an old man who imparts these wise words upon you. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Miyamoto did experiment though. The game at one point had you choose between the sword and the boomerang.
Oh, wow.
Where the old man says instead, It's dangerous to go alone. Take whichever weapon you prefer. Taking up the sword, there's an innate something about it that spans across art, literature, and films. That tells us
You've taken your first step into a larger work.
as Zelda reached its final stages of development, the team faced some of its trickiest hurdles, that being the overall game balance, such as figuring out the right amount of rupees for an item, or how many hearts you would lose against certain enemies. There were even little things like Link's sword placement. As you can see here, in the final version they moved it down a pixel. They also did things such as clearing out the number of trees in an area, shifting the room layouts and enemy numbers, even modifying the look of enemies, and fixing any glitches or bugs, or at least fixing as many glitches and bugs as they can, as their release date was fast approaching. One thing the upgraded Famicom Disk System gave them was the ability to add in an opening crawl, to give the story details, and all the items you could find. And at the end there was this little tidbit stating, please look up the manual for details. With the game being this big adventure, the team did have this fear that the puzzles may turn off players. After all, this was the mid-1980s. This was a time when even buying items from a merchant in-game was a new concept. What they made was an instruction manual to help. However, the Famicom Disk System had, well, discs. So in Japan, you could take game discs you were done with to a kiosk at your local store. Then, for 500 yen, your disc could be rewritten with a new game. Because of this rewrite ability, that meant some players wouldn't have the manual it came with. Hence the disclaimer at the end. Something new for Zelda that wasn't in Super Mario Bros. Was that after you defeat Ganon and save Zelda, you get treated to an end credit scroll. The team used pseudonyms instead of their actual names. A reason for this is that game companies back then didn't want other companies poaching their talent. One of their biggest scares came at the very end. Composer Koji Kondo had used Maurice Ravel's Bolero as the music for the game's opening titles, assuming Bolero was public domain, since Ravel had died a long time ago.
Right, but immediately before finishing The Legend of Zelda, we learned it was still under copyright. Koji Kondo.
Uh-oh. In Japan, music generally falls into public domain after 50 years. But they looked up Bolero, though a little late, and found it was around 49 years and 11 months after Ravel's death. And they couldn't delay the release of the Famicom Disk System any longer, since it had already been delayed twice.
So I pulled an all-nighter to compose the opening song, Koji Kondo.
Granted, it's a variation of the overworld theme. But it is reworked and refitted for the opening.
I was desperate. It was really down to the wire, Koji Kondo.
And with that, the final polish of the game was finished. The Legend of Zelda was ready for its greatest test yet, the judgment of the Japanese public. Ooh. Zelda no Densetsu, which translates to The Legend of Zelda. Released in Japan on February 21st, 1986, as a launch game for the Famicom Disk System. However, above the title was another title that would be used one time, the Hyrule Fantasy. When asked about the Hyrule Fantasy title, Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka responded,
The game features a world of swords and sorcery, and you adventure across this spectacular land called Hyrule. So it seemed appropriate. When throwing out all sorts of ideas for names and assigning them to enemies and so forth, we thought Hyrule sounded perfect for the name of a region. I think that's why we did that. Is that right?
Yes, we also hoped that The Legend of Zelda would continue as a series, so we intended to call that series the Hyrule Fantasy.
So there was a chance that all future titles could have been called the Hyrule Fantasy instead of continuing as The Legend of Zelda. Just think, the Hyrule Fantasy, Ocarina of Time, the Hyrule Fantasy, Tears of the Kingdom. Not quite the same.
And it came out overseas without that label, so we thought that The Legend of Zelda would be good enough. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Zelda also released among one of the best years for Japanese anime, Studio Ghibli's first film, Castle in the Sky. The original Dragon Ball anime series also debuted in 1986. Nintendo advertised Zelda and the FDS with 2 commercials. The first Japanese commercial featured a lengthy tutorial on how to use the Famicom Disk System, citing its advantages and then showcasing Zelda. It's here that we get to see the artwork from the instruction manual brought to life, and even voiced. Nintendo really was all in on the FDS, and the amount of work that went into this promo really emphasized that. They would follow it up with another commercial featuring a prominent Japanese TV personality and a famous child actress, screaming with intensity about Zelda, poking fun at the fact that the game is quite hard, and here we possibly get Link's first words ever. Yeah, he literally says you suck. Super Mario Bros. 2 was also featured in this commercial, for those that care. However, there was a mystery promotional campaign for The Legend of Zelda that started even before the commercials aired. It's a disc version of The Legend of Zelda that's ultra rare, and being so long ago, details are scarce. It's known as the Charumera version of The Legend of Zelda. Nintendo had partnered with Myojo Charumera, who makes ramen, for a prize drawing that 1,500 lucky winners would get the infamous disc. The question was, is this version of The Legend of Zelda different than the regular disc version? This went unanswered for over 30 years, but then, one day in 2020, it appeared on eBay for $1,000. On GamingAlexandria.com, there's an article where the author found someone who would float the hefty price tag, acquire the rare disc, and test it out to see if it was in fact truly different, only to find that it was in fact no different than the retail version. The labels are different though. And with Zelda no Densetsu out among the Japanese masses, the reception was, well, great. Selling 1 million copies on day 1. Critics hailed the graphics, the gameplay, and Kondo's amazing score as a landmark in gaming excellence. With so many puzzles and secrets to unlock, and a giant world to explore, players were enthralled, and companies were eager to satiate the fledgling Zelda fandom, with dozens upon dozens of magazines and books, revealing secrets, tricks, and tips for becoming the hero of Hyrule. There's even a glimpse of a female Link in a magazine, which, according to the sources, was a mistake made by the magazine. Nintendo soon followed up Zelda with other notable FDS games, such as Metroid, Castlevania, and Super Mario Bros. 2, or as it's better known in the US, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. The first Super Mario Bros. Game was gaining huge popularity, leading to the character mascot business, or rather for businesses, the licensing of characters for other money-making opportunities. Companies flocked to Nintendo with licensing requests. Along with Mario, Zelda would give Nintendo another character they could license out for money. But when Nintendo's general manager Hiroshi Imanishi asked President Hiroshi Yamauchi about licensing Zelda, Yamauchi had a surprising response.
But at the time, Yamauchi-san told me it was okay to license Mario, but that we mustn't license Zelda. Hiroshi Imanishi.
Zelda was a huge success, so one has to wonder why on earth Yamauchi didn't want to license Zelda. He'd be losing out on a ton of cash, right?
No, it wasn't that. He said even if you license Zelda, there's no way it could beat Mario. That's why he said we shouldn't license Zelda.
Mario would be propped up, becoming the mascot for Nintendo. Obviously, in the coming decades, Zelda would get its share of licensing. I mean, I wear Zelda pajama pants, so there's that. Though Nintendo still made sure Mario would always remain at the forefront of Nintendo's image. And through the mid-1980s, Japan had a booming economy, and Nintendo rode high on the Famicom Disk System's success. Though not for long. Cracks in the Famicom Disk System quickly emerged, for even the power of The Legend of Zelda could not save it. One problem was the diskettes themselves, being fragile and could accidentally be demagnetized, which could lead to numerous errors. And cartridges were so much more robust by comparison. Also, the disk system console itself often had problems with the internal belt breaking and, in some cases, melting. Another issue was piracy. Nintendo tried a few revisions of the discs to prevent bootleggers, but hackers of the 80s are like hackers of today, and anti-piracy measures didn't stop them. Price also had a major impact with the discs being cheaper than cartridges. Then you add in the disc rewrite ability, which made them even cheaper. This left little room for big profits, and companies began shifting their FDS projects to Famicom cartridge projects. One thing often forgot about the FDS is that it had load times. Though Zeldas weren't as bad as some other FDS games, they were still there. Plus, when you start up a game and you insert side A, it loads up the title menu. Then you gotta eject it, flip it, insert side B now to begin playing. Oh, load time, then begin playing. Rather inconvenient. Within a few years, many companies avoided the disc system completely and just made cartridges. Technology on cartridges also advanced, not long after the FDS's release. Cartridges could then hold more memory, and the advent of an internal battery allowed for game saves. And with Zelda taking up nearly 4 times the storage capacity of Super Mario Bros., this tech improvement was necessary to put The Legend of Zelda onto a cartridge. Needless to say, the FDS was on its way out and would never see the shelf of a retail store anywhere near the US of A. Nintendo of America's president Minoru Arakawa couldn't help but worry. He was looking at the first prototype of The Legend of Zelda in the United States. Puzzles, in-game text, and a giant open world made Arakawa wonder if this game was too complicated for American audiences. Well, he would put the game to the test. The dialogue with many of the NPCs in the game were in Japanese, so Arakawa made sure Japanese fluent employees sat with the playtesters to translate during gameplay. As the results for the playtest came back, he found a troubling trend. The testers gave the game high marks, which was good, but they did not warm up to the game immediately. In fact, the results showed it took them up to 10 hours to understand the game and start enjoying it. So, what's a president supposed to do in order to keep you playing long enough to love it? One easy thing is to give it a really, really unique packaging. We know in an early kit that was given out at the electronics show CES that Zelda started out with a very different box cover. But Link's dashing smile here wasn't enough. The cover was changed to the now infamous tan brown with a metal shield, separating it from the typical Nintendo game box you would see at the time. Where most Nintendo cartridges were sporting the dull gray, The Legend of Zelda would bask in a golden cartridge. Inside the box, American gamers were treated to more goodies than in Japan. It mostly had the same translated instruction manual, but what was new to the American version was a sealed map.
The Legend of Zelda Maps and Strategies. Can you and your wits alone save Zelda? This map holds useful information to help you discover the Triforce fragments and rescue Zelda. You should only use the map and strategic tips as a last resort. If you believe in yourself and your inner strength, you will conquer Ganon and return peace to the land of Hyrule.
I can do it. I can save Hyrule. I don't need you, map.
But everyone breaks the seal.
Even with all this, Arakawa and his crew were still terrified that the players would give up on the game, so they created a toll-free 1-800 number. So if you needed help, who are you gonna call? Nintendo.
We released The Legend of Zelda on June 27, 1987. All of a sudden, the telephone started ringing. We hired 4 people to answer questions over the telephone, and those 4 people were busy all the time. So we increased from 4 to 5, 10, 20, 40, 50, and we ended up with 200. Minoru Arakawa.
1987. Now that was a year. That was... a year of big albums. Kids scoured toy stores to find their favorite Thundercat or My Little Pony, but also grab a copy of The Legend of Zelda. Nintendo hyped it well, and Zelda quickly topped the sales charts. becoming the first video game of 1987 to sell over 1 million copies. The following year, it would add another 1 million copies sold. And by 1990, it would top 3 million. Critics, well, they showered the game with much praise. Nintendo's call line was bombarded with people asking questions of how to beat The Legend of Zelda. Nintendo eventually expanded the hotline to all their games. Still, against all other games, Zelda remained number 1 amongst the callers. And there was one puzzle that stumped more Zelda players than any other.
Nintendo Gameplay, this is Katie. How can I help you?
Hiya, the name's Rick, and I got a question about The Legend of Zelda. Don't worry, I already asked my parents' permission, but I am over 40. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Great. We always make sure that in the first 3 minutes, we get the kids, actual kids, parents' permission. Rick, what's your game question?
So there's this creature in The Legend of Zelda, and it goes, grumble, grumble. What do I do?
Yep, our most common question. But we don't just give away our secrets. We are trained in the Socratic method of game counseling. Rick, what does it mean when your stomach is going grumble, grumble?
I'm hungry.
Right. And how do you make it stop?
Well, I get something to... That's it. I feed him.
When they figure it out for themselves, it's their discovery, not ours. Sometimes we just get people who call in who just want someone to talk to.
Yeah, so I have been absolutely loving The Legend of Zelda. It has been the game of games. It's just, I know I've been spending way too much time playing, and, it's not an addiction or anything, but I do feel that my wife might leave me if I don't stop playing soon. There it is.
You want my advice?
Yeah, I'd love it.
Shut off the game.
The call-in hotline was one way Nintendo aimed to further connect their brand to the hearts and minds of players. Another way was through their Nintendo Fun Club newsletter, which you could subscribe to for free, just like this channel, if you wanted.
Yes,
the Nintendo Fun Club news was scrapped together by the unlikely dynamic duo of Gail Tilden and Howard Phillips, knowing that kids throughout America craved extra information about their favorite Nintendo games. Zelda, of course, being one of the most sought after. And in a time with no YouTube walkthroughs or online forums, your only hope as a child Zelda player was the unreliable schoolyard gossip, or from Nintendo themselves. Gail and Howard put together the Nintendo Fun.
Hell there, Daddy G. Welcome to the stream. We're doing a doing a mashup between Link from The Legend of Zelda and the Venom Symbiote. We're doing the histories. As this is a deep dive art stream. Welcome to the stream. Only here for a few minutes. No worries. Much love.
Club newsletter, with issue number 2 showcasing Zelda as a game for adventurous players only. The newsletter was really only for advertising new upcoming games, but also featured maps and tips. Issue 3 had a full map of the overworld of Hyrule, marking item locations. To further ingratiate themselves with their players, a section of the newsletter was devoted to the very best, listing their names of players who had the highest scores in their games, like Super Mario, but also mentioned the first 10 players who beat Ganon, calling them Ganon beaters. Well, at least the first 10 players who sent in evidence or called their hotline of the conquest.
I had no idea.
A later issue would show players who finished the second quest. As their database of subscribers and addressees expanded, no email yet, it became too much for them to continue doing this for free. Thus, they began creating a full-fledged magazine called Player Power. Oh wait, that was under copyright, so they changed it to Nintendo Power. And Nintendo Power hit the world featuring a big walkthrough of the second quest in The Legend of Zelda, presenting detailed maps of the dungeons and overworlds. They also had a walkthrough for Super Mario Bros. 2, but we don't care about that. But what the kids of 1987 did care about was watching their favorite Saturday morning cartoon shows, such as The Real Ghostbusters or Alvin and the Chipmunks. I know you higher concept kids out there in 1987 were watching Star Trek The Next Generation, and silly tree huggers like myself were crushing on the teenage alien Evie from Out of This World, for those of you that remember that show. And it's during these shows' commercial breaks is where Nintendo would strike. This commercial and the ones that followed were headed up by Nintendo's new promotions manager, Bill White. One commercial could be upwards of $5 million. Really? Millions of dollars. For this. Well, the commercial gained acclaim and interest from the ad industry, so Bill White was doing something right. Even if I don't see it. Nintendo's other commercial shamelessly promotes their Fun Club newsletter as two very stereotypical 80s kids tell you how rad the newsletter is, and then they turn on Zelda as they, well...
Octoroks, Tektites, levers too, but with your help our hero pulls through. Yeah.
Yeah, they rap. Not an uncommon occurrence in the mid-80s, and it is definitely a commercial that worked on me as a kid. But where Nintendo was firing on all cylinders and riding high on successes, controversy followed. Jewish groups began protesting the game, claiming that the level 3 dungeon had an inverted swastika. What the groups didn't understand was that in Japan, it doesn't mean the same thing. Known as the manji, stemming from Buddhism, and is a sign of good luck and a prosperous future. Hitler and his Third Reich, like many evil regimes, took the symbol originally meant for good and changed it for their own purposes. In the end, the backlash did nothing to slow the sales of Zelda. There was much talk amongst the kids in the schoolyards and adults in the workplace about Zelda, from where secrets are to whether the little guy in the green tunic was named Zelda. To Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto, this is exactly what he had hoped for: the exchange of information. Even with no internet or social media, players found a way to communicate and connect with one another about the game, much in the same way Miyamoto witnessed with the Tower of Jiraga in the Japanese arcades just a few years prior. Another thing that gets much discussion is the translation and the changes between the Japanese and the English versions of The Legend of Zelda. While some changes are confusing, others are just downright baffling.
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this,
says the old man in the cave at the beginning. The Legend of Zelda was Nintendo's first major localization venture, where a lot of text and nuance had to be translated from Japanese to English. In the Japanese version, you'll notice the text is positioned differently than in the English version, possibly to make it more like a speech bubble you would see in a comic book, while the English version just takes up the whole top portion of the screen. From Japanese to English, the old man essentially says the same thing. However, in Japan, how you speak and the words you use tell us what kind of person you are, whether you're male or female, young or even old. So the nuance missed here is that the old man is speaking the way an old man would speak. Same goes for the old woman. She uses old woman speech in Japanese. As for the merchant guy, he uses a more non-standard Western Japanese dialect. So the English translators gave him a different dialect. Special note, The Legend of Zelda is written completely in katakana, one of the 3 writing systems in Japanese. Usually when reading Japanese, you'll find a mixture of 2 or all 3 of the writing systems. So why does Zelda only have 1? Limited memory space. Having all 3 Japanese writing systems would take up way too much memory. Where many of the dialogue translations are well done, others just leave you scratching your head. Take for instance this line: "Eastmost peninsula is the secret." Clearly they meant peninsula but spelled it wrong. Stranger still is the Japanese version says nothing anywhere near this. Instead, it talks about how you can't shoot arrows without money, which is true and helpful because your arrow ammo is dictated by how much money you have. So what is the secret that lies in the eastmost peninsula? Here's the easternmost part of the map. My guess is it's referencing the 100 rupees hidden up here. There's also a money-making game located here, but that's easy to find, so I doubt that's the secret. Lastly, we can't rule out this area, which holds a hidden heart container. I don't know, heck, maybe it's talking about all 3. But it bothers me. When Nintendo began to end production of the Famicom Disk System, they re-released Zelda on a Famicom cartridge, where they called it Zelda no Densetsu 1. The number 1 is clearly there to make sure you don't confuse it with Zelda 2, which was out at that time. This cartridge version plays and sounds the same as the US version cartridge, but the text is in Japanese. Then in 2003, Nintendo updated The Legend of Zelda for a re-release on the GameCube in a special collector's edition alongside 3 other classic Zelda games. They took to fixing many of the dialogue mishaps of the original, the most noticeable being at the opening title crawl. The story description is altered to read smoother and be more grammatically correct. And this is the version that they would continue using as The Legend of Zelda released on more and more Nintendo consoles. The Game Boy Advance, the Wii Virtual Console, the Wii U Virtual Console, but for some reason, the Nintendo 3DS version would use a modified US Revision 1. So basically it's the original Nintendo version, but it has none of the 2003 updates. And let's not forget the NES Remix, which takes parts from famous NES games, Zelda included, and turns them into new and different minigame challenges. So what else did they update and fix in the 2003 version? Well, finally, the eastmost peninsula line was oh wait, no, it's still the same. The 2003 version did fix some grammar errors, but missed others. Kind of baffling, honestly. It wouldn't be until the release of the NES Mini in 2016 that Nintendo finally fixed the famous Peninsula mistake and then the rest, which would be the same version for the Nintendo Switch Online and the Game & Watch. This next line leads into an interesting change between the Japanese and English versions. The hint from the old man goes like this: "Secret power is said to be in the arrow." Wonderful. Now let's call upon the 2003 version to make it sound better. "Hey, secret power is said to be in the arrow." It's referring to an enemy called Pull's Voice. It's a hint revealing their weakness to arrows. Okay, now the Japanese version instead explains some creatures to have a weakness to sound. Indeed, it's different, but it is still referring to the weakness of the Pull's Voice, because in the Japanese version, arrows don't work on them. So, what's the deal with the Pull's Voice? If we look at the second controller on the Famicom, you'll find a microphone. The idea is that you scream into it and it defeats the Pull's Voice. Or so I thought. Here they are. Now you die. Die. Turns out it's all in how you blow it. The US system never had a microphone, so they just made the Pull's Voice weak to arrows. Now, let us consult the instruction manual. Pull's Voice, a ghost with big ears, and a weak point. He hates loud noise. This clearly was a translation straight from the Japanese instruction manual, without the knowledge that it was changed for the American release. If all the hints failed you, then you can just defeat them the old-fashioned way, with your trusty sword. Certain changes were probably a no-brainer for Nintendo of America. Number 1 being the Bible, as it's called in the Japanese version. For North America, it was changed to Book of Magic. The use of the word Bible in the game was not to promote or offend Christianity. In Japan, there are many instances where they naively use religious or cultural material without much care or thought as to its meaning. Also, the idea that the Bible would give the magical rod's beam the ability to burst into fire would probably not make much sense to Westerners. The Japanese cartridge version of Zelda 1 would stick to the American version, calling it Book of Magic. The Bible change was partly the start of Nintendo of America cutting out religious references or imagery in their video games. The first Zelda was clearly only the start, as though they seem to have been quite okay with leaving the crosses on the gravestones and on Link's shield. And finally, the recorder. Well, here it goes. In both versions of the game, it's called the recorder, but the katakana translates to more as flute? To confuse things further, the English instruction manual calls it a whistle. Somehow, communication on what this was supposed to be called really fell through. Now, we do have to take into account that this was the very early days of localization. They didn't have the large, specifically trained teams with years of experience as they do now. Back then, they were likely a small ragtag team thrown together, sometimes a single person. The game cartridges themselves would undergo various changes throughout the years. There's the popular gold cartridge, yes, but then later came the NES Classics version with the gray, the rare Nintendo test cartridge of Zelda, used at their service centers for testing consoles they were fixing. Then there's the versions within the versions. How many screws is in the cart? 3 or 5? Does it have red writing on the back or not? Is the Nintendo seal of approval oval or a circle? Then you apply this to the variations of box covers and instruction manuals, and it can be immensely overwhelming, unless you're an expert or using a guide. Probably the most vastly different version of the original Zelda would be the BS Legend of Zelda, where BS stands for exactly what you think it does. Broadcast satellite, right? The BS version was on the Satellaview, a Japanese-only add-on for the Super Nintendo. It plays predominantly like the original, the difference being Link is replaced by your BS avatar character, based on the info you gave when you first created the account. Access via the St. Giga satellite station during a certain time frame allowed you to download and play the game. BS Zelda utilized the Sound Link system, which allowed data to be streamed alongside your playthrough. This gave the game an orchestrated soundtrack and a voiceover track.
彼女たちがいなければ戦いは苦しくなる。気をつけねばなるまい。
The Satellaview broadcasted for 5 years before shutting down. And with that, let's bring this to the final chapter and this journey to an end. Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto has never been satisfied with the original Zelda. He believed its in-game systems were inadequate. There was so much more he wanted to do, but the hardware constraints of the Famicom Disk System prevented him from those grand ambitions. So, to those who say the original Legend of Zelda's game mechanics and obtuse puzzles are dated and haven't aged well, Miyamoto would probably agree with you. But we all must start somewhere, right? As the original Legend of Zelda would be the start for so many beloved characters and a world that would carry on through many games to come. Even coming full circle over 30 years later, when the original Legend of Zelda's overworld map was used as a template for what would become The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. The Legend of Zelda makes you feel the excitement of exploring a vast world of secrets and possibilities. In some ways, its rudimentary graphics give us an ambiguity, leaving much to our imagination. And no one's imagination is better than your own. In the book The Psychology of Zelda tells us in playing The Legend of Zelda, you project yourself onto the hero, Link. What also helps is that Link is silent. He never speaks in the game, and it would remain that way throughout the series.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Well, throughout the games at least.
How about a kiss for luck?
You've got to be kidding.
Okay, I admit, there's a gray area of exceptions.
Wow!
But for the most part, Link remains silent. Many games have adopted this same stance of the silent protagonist, so we can more easily embody them. When we start up the game, we project the hero within us onto him. Link holds on to that heroic projection as he bravely fights his way through dungeon after dungeon, discovering new tools and gaining skills that empower him to finally overcome the evil Ganon, save Zelda, and the land that needed him. It is in this triumph that gives you the opportunity for self-growth, gaining you the feeling of triumph and courage in the face of adversity, making the victory yours and yours alone. A part of you now has lived the experience of being courageous and growing in strength. I mean, let's face it, real life is tough. By playing the hero in The Legend of Zelda, you open yourself up to that feeling of being courageous, being assertive, and gaining wisdom. Then, when you venture back out into the real world, you can take a little bit of that courage with you. For even the smallest amount of courage can make all the difference. Wow, if you made it this far, you are impressive. Thanks so much for watching the video. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked the video, and if you didn't, I appreciate the engagement. Please subscribe as it really helps out a small YouTuber like myself. See you next time.
Well, that was a pretty great history video, hey? I learned some stuff along the way. I don't know about you guys. Really quite informative about how, you know, the early goings, how that game was created. Right on. Okay. Well, we're about, I would say, you know, a little more than halfway done with the drawing. I've got some base colors on here. We're looking pretty good, I think, in terms of time-wise. So what I chose to do was I chose to kind of really lean into Link. So the figure is Link. I wanted to see, like, how the symbiote would, like, power this guy. So I kind of have, like, I was thinking the tendrils, the equipment, the shield and the sword are really important. So I'm thinking that it's attracted to Link, but it's also really attracted to the power items, right? So it's grabbing onto the sword. It'll probably form the rest of the sword, you know, as Link gets it. I put kind of the Venom face on Link, and with, you know, the tongue and the teeth, and I've got the glowing eyes. For me, when Link is powered up, I think of the glowing eyes of the elf, right? So his eyes are going to be glowing. Maybe I might make the Triforce. Back up. Don't move the camera, please. Backup came to visit. Hello, Backup. I'm thinking of having the Triforce also glow as well. And I wanted to kind of keep that almost like comic book style mixed in with the kind of anime style that sometimes Link gets kind of portrayed with. So that's the initial attempt. What we're going to do next is we're going to, you know what? I think I want to put some of the, like, you know how, like, when Link gets powered up, he's got, like, those glowing bits, these, like, white bits on his cloak and stuff like that. I also thought keeping Venom green, a little bit green, makes it more Link, right? Like, so the symbiote, like, why am I not putting a spider symbol on him? For me, the symbiote for Venom, it enhances the host. Yes, he took a lot of, you know, the Spider-Man symbol from Spider-Man originally, but I think, you know, I think the viewer's smart enough to understand that it's got to emphasize the host, not necessarily Spider-Man. So I didn't do a Spider-Man symbol. What I am going to try and maybe do is maybe a white, that Link symbol. You know, what I have down there, right there in green, that symbol kind of glowing white would look good, glowing, because that kind of represents Link, I think, for me anyways. Where the Z represents Zelda, and that's not Zelda, it's Link. So that's a goal here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just tighten up the colors, the shadows, and when we get into the highlights too, I think it'll look striking, right? I actually really quite like the white light background. Really makes it feel comic booky too. If you have any suggestions in chat of what maybe I should think about, tell me. Let me know. If you guys are a fan of Zelda and Venom, let me know. I might do some spit coming off the tongue and stuff like that too. I just wanted to get the base colors down for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely do some glowing. The glowing eyes, for sure. I'm gonna put in a little bit more shadow, some highlights, and we'll get into some like pencil crowns and stuff like that and get really heightened stuff. But I wanted to get some base color down first, right? Yeah, I threw in these like leaves. I don't know why. I'm thinking I'm trying to get wind, like make it look like there's flow, like there's a wind blowing. Maybe I'll put some like some shadow of some wind blowing in the background. I want the swirling motion kind of going up like this, right? I want something for your eye to go around on the page. So yeah, Noisy, I know you're rather new to the stream too, right? So I do occasionally a deep dive every so often we do a deep dive on a subject, whether it's like either I did a lot of Halloween stuff, theme stuff, monsters and killers and slashers. I've also done ones on I did a Future Cyber and Chrome series, which was all sci-fi, right? Then occasionally I'm going to be doing mashups like this. This one is actually a commission, so I was like, okay, I thought maybe I can combine it and make a stream out of it too. So I thought basically I love geeking out, and the reason why I love geeking out is I ran a comic and collectible shop for close to 10 years in downtown Vancouver, Canada. I love geek out conversations. I love getting really in the weeds about a subject. I love learning about it. I love that. And so that's kind of the point of these deep dives is I want to expose, there's a reason why these characters are popular. There's a reason why people love these characters. And I want, the more people I expose to that, the better, right? So that's what these deep dives at the heart are about. I don't talk very much during these deep dives. It's just because I don't want to really interrupt. I will pause it every so often and say hi and stuff like that. But that's why I'm so silent. I do apologize, but it's all about the love of the character, right? So we're gonna shift gears here, and we are gonna go full on Venom. So it's enough about Link, enough about Zelda. Let's learn about the symbiotes, right? Noisy says, this is my 5th view. Mashups are great. Last one I saw was Spawn and Batman with Joker and Violator. Oh, cool. Nice. The previous one we did, which I'm going to be putting up on YouTube soon, is a Calvin and Hobbes Deadpool and Wolverine mashup. That one was a riot. That was another commission as well, which was kind of funny. So I do do commissions. If you're interested in seeing something come to life, whether I stream it or not, even off the side, I am available and I fit everybody's budgets. But the cost is incredibly cheap. Whether it's a sketch or a full on picture. I love being challenged. So just throwing it out there. If you want to get a commission done before Christmas, the cutoff is going to be happening soon. I believe mid-October. I have to cut it off because I just can't. I won't be able to get it done. So, all right, guys, let's continue now. All right, let's continue. Let's shift gears and let's learn about Venom. This one is going to be by the fellow geeks at Screen Crush. These guys are awesome. I've met them at San Diego Comic-Con, and they're wonderful. They're awesome. They love comic books. They love comics. They love film, and they love geeking out. So they're right in the heartbeat of this type of stream. So we're gonna do Screen Crush, okay? All right, guys, here we go. It's Venom time. I gotta put my disclaimer first. Cue Venom.
Eyes, lungs, pancreas. So many snacks, so little time.
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. So today, we are going to go through the definitive history of one of Marvel's most popular characters, Venom. Now, while he initially started off as a villain in Spider-Man comics, Venom has since become one of Marvel's best anti-hero protagonists. Now, we're going to talk to you about his evolution throughout the comics and the really complex storytelling that's currently being adapted for the big screen. Because, in addition to comics, including his own titles, Venom has also become a popular character for merchandise, cartoons, video games, songs, and of course, movies, including his own trilogy starring Tom Hardy. And we're we're also going to talk with several of the artists who shaped who Venom is, including Ryan Stegman, Mark Bagley, and the Todd McFarlane. But let's start at the very beginning, when Venom first appeared in comics before he was even Venom, but rather a mysterious new suit for Spider-Man. So the idea of a gritty black costume with enhanced powers for Peter Parker originally did not come from Stan Lee or any of Marvel's writers and editors. Instead, it came from a fan of the comics named Randy Schueller, who entered a competition for aspiring Marvel writers and artists. So this was way back in 1982, and Randy pitched the idea that the Wasp and Reed Richards would create a new Spider-Man costume using the same technology the Fantastic Four uses to mimic their powers. You know, so when Sue Storm turns invisible, her clothes do too, or when the Human Torch flames on, his pants don't catch fire. Now, Randy also envisioned this new suit to enhance Spidey's powers, giving him extra grip to walls. Now, notably, he saw the suit as jet black to give Spider-Man more stealth, although he imagined the spider emblem on the chest to be blood red. Now, Marvel liked the general idea that Randy Schueller had and bought the concept, which would eventually evolve into the Venom that we all know and love. And they bought this for a whopping $220. $220,000? Nope, just $220, which in 1982 money was still probably not nearly enough.
I count 300. Not enough.
After all, this guy pretty much invented Spider-Man's famous black suit, but hopefully Randy bought himself something nice with the money.
Here, buy yourself something nice.
And he can be happy that his idea brought so many fans so much joy. Now, of course, Marvel used Randy's idea as a starting point, and then the idea grew from there. For starters, they changed the blood red emblem to white, possibly to make it stand out from Spider-Woman's new costume at the time, which went very heavy on the red. Under Marvel editor Jim Shooter, who purchased the concept, artists Mike Zeck and Rick Leonardi designed the original black costume for Spidey. Now, we should also note that several Marvel characters' uniforms were getting redesigns at this time, such as Iron Man's silver and red suit. This is in part because former Marvel artists like Jack Kirby began the process of suing Marvel for rights to these characters. So Marvel wanted to change the original design so artists didn't necessarily come after them and try to claim copyright ownership of Spider-Man. Now, another key concept of the black costume was that it was not fabric at all, but instead a self-repairing organic material. Now, surprisingly, this idea was created by legendary comic writer John Byrne, not for Spider-Man, but for a different Marvel superhero, Iron Fist. Byrne wanted to introduce this idea so that it wouldn't be weird that every time you saw Iron Fist after a fight, his costume was suddenly good as new. This new black suit was finally introduced in 1984 during Marvel's first major crossover event, Secret Wars. While fighting in Battleworld with the other major Marvel heroes, Spidey finds a black glob that attaches to him and replaces his traditional suit. So in addition to being able to repair itself, the suit had some other cool powers, such as the ability to look like regular clothes when Spider-Man would walk around as Peter Parker, and the ability to organically create webs rather than rely on web shooters.
Like, does it just come out of your wrists, or does it come out of anywhere else?
Now, the original Secret Wars storyline has been revisited since then, you know, because comics love retcons.
But what are you gonna do?
One interesting piece of trivia that we later found out is that before attaching to Peter, the symbiote initially bonds with Deadpool. Now, Deadpool can immediately sense that the suit is alive, and he puts it back for Spider-Man to find just minutes later. Now, I'm gonna break down the post-credits and all of these possibilities, but first, look at this sweet new Venom merch that I just got out of our basement. We've got this sweet My Little Venom shirt, the Bully Parker, denim, and this Dirty Dancing parody. And you can find links to all of these below. Oh my God! Oh no! Okay, there's a Venom symbiote in the box, and it's trying to take me over. Now, I cannot guarantee if your merch will have a Venom symbiote in it or not, but you can find out by hitting the link below. Don't worry, person. Flame on! Ah, thanks, Doug. And just a reminder to get your sweet Venom merch, check out our links in the description. Now, the actual first appearance of the suit was not in Secret Wars, it was in Amazing Spider-Man number 252. This is because the previous issue saw Spider-Man being whisked off to Secret Wars, and the next issue he returns. So people actually had to buy several issues of Secret Wars to find out where the black suit came from. Now, over the course of several months, Spider-Man slowly realizes his suit is sentient and possibly doing things without his knowledge or consent. This is finally confirmed when Mr. Fantastic is able to separate the suit from Peter by using sound waves. They trapped the alien goo so they could study it further, but this left Peter without a costume. He was forced to go home in an old Fantastic Four suit with a paper bag over his head and a kick-me sign that Johnny Storm put on his back. Now, I bring this up because chances are you've seen this Bagman suit before, most likely in Marvel's Spider-Man game. The goo, which we later find out is a symbiote, escapes the lab. So why is it called a symbiote? Well, in real life, a symbiote is something that exists in a symbiotic relationship with another being. For example, a lichen, which is two separate species of algae and fungus that coexist together for one another's benefit. Another example of a symbiotic relationship would be like me and Doug.
Yeah, you're my big buddy.
Thanks, man. So the symbiote remains bitter against Peter for rejecting him, which is why Venom will always have an antagonistic relationship with Spider-Man. It escapes the lab and some hijinks ensue that we're not going to get into here, but eventually it finds its most famous host, Eddie Brock. So Eddie was created by David Michelinie and Todd McFarlane, and after a brief cameo in 1986, made his real debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 1988. Originally, Eddie was a reporter who has his reputation ruined after fingering the wrong guy as a serial killer called the Sin Eater. He blames Spider-Man for his downfall since Spider-Man caught the real Sin Eater.
So wait, how did Eddie and the symbiote meet?
Well, Peter rids himself of the symbiote in a church by using the sound waves from the bell. But in the sanctuary of the church, Eddie Brock was suicidal and praying to God, and that is when the symbiote found him, and then the two of them bond over their shared hatred for Spider-Man. But Venom's behind-the-scenes creation was more of a happy accident, because the new artist on The Amazing Spider-Man, Todd McFarlane, didn't want to draw the black costume.
I had one condition. I'll come and I'll do it, but we got to get rid of the black costume.
But Marvel editorial pushed back. They wanted to keep the black costume, so McFarlane proposed a compromise.
I'll just take the costume. It's an alien thing, I think. We'll take the costume off Spider-Man, and then we'll put it on somebody else. Done. And so you'll still have your costume. So that was that was me just being an ornery employee saying, no, I won't. I'm not going to draw that version of Spider-Man. The byproduct is you get Venom and then everything that Venom begats from that.
But rather than simply placing the costume on a new villain, McFarlane wanted to give Venom this inhuman appearance.
So I drew him sort of big and alien-esque looking, assuming he was a monster.
So he was surprised when Amazing Spider-Man writer and Venom co-creator David Michelinie decided that Venom would be a reporter named Eddie Brock.
And I was like, what? Eddie Brock? Eddie Brock's like a normal physique, and I did this big giant sort of monster hulking thing.
Now Eddie Brock is obviously a major character in Earth 616, and he's going through plenty of changes and interactions over the past 35 years, just like Venom. So after Eddie was fired from his job, he became a depressed loner and spent all of his time bulking up and lifting weights, which is why Venom is so jacked. He's a bitter, misanthropic loner who is filled with anger and resentment that's more or less rooted in deep insecurities, but he's also at his core an extremely lonely person, which is partly why he bonds with the symbiote. In Amazing Spider-Man 299, we first see Venom as a set of eyes in the shadows, and we're meant to think that this is Spider-Man greeting Mary Jane as he comes home. But then we see the grin, and it is the closest comics have ever come to giving me a jump scare. When Venom was created, Spider-Man had Marvel's most colorful rogues gallery. His villains were mostly older men, warped versions of the father figure that Peter sought after his Uncle Ben died. All of these villains wanted things: wealth, glory, fame, youth, power. But Venom was different. All Venom wanted was for Spider-Man to die. And unlike other villains, he knew Peter Parker's secret identity. In his first appearance, he terrorized Mary Jane. He later broke the nose of Peter's ex, the Black Cat. He visited Aunt May at her home. He also neutralized Peter's greatest power, his spider sense. Venom could be lurking outside his window or turn invisible like the Predator. Plus, he was massive, looming over Spider-Man like he was the literal shadow of death. But behind the scenes, Venom's creators had no idea that they had just created a new cornerstone of the Marvel Universe.
When you're doing deadlines, you're not paying attention sometimes to like what's happening there. And in all honesty, we've all done the exact same process with 20 other characters we've created that turned into forgettable characters.
But when Venom first appeared as an insert on the cover of Amazing 316, sales skyrocketed.
Fundamentally, it's a very kind of cool design. You took the black costume and Todd just decided, okay, we're gonna get this huge guy in the costume and the teeth, and it's a design that just pulls you in.
I remember when he got popular, I was going, oh man, people are going to start paying attention to it because all the big meaningful villains, at least at that point, had been created in the early 60s in Stan Lee's time. And it had been a long time since anybody had done any like meaningful bad guy, right? There'd been meaningful good guys, but no meaningful bad guys. And I go, man, maybe, I remember sitting there at some point going, man, maybe Venom might have a chance at being important, right?
And as the years went by, he evolved. In his second appearance, McFarlane added Venom's fangs and gave him clawed fingertips.
I would think that like monsters should be like dogs and wolves and things like that, that their teeth should be like irregular and that they should be, you know, dirty, and that they shouldn't look like they just came from a dentist, right? It should be a mess. It should be a mess. They should be, you know, creatures, not humanoids, if you will.
And then artist Erik Larsen transformed Venom into an even more grotesque character, further emphasizing the monstrous qualities that McFarlane had created.
And Eric was so out there when it came to, he just sort of stretched the cartoony aspect of it to the max.
Larsen also gave Venom his seminal drool, but artist Mark Bagley took this salviary dribble a little bit further and made it a very prominent feature. But according to him, he wasn't even inspired to do this by a regular Spider-Man artist.
I get lots of compliments for the tongue and the drool and that sort of thing, the way I draw the character. Because before me, you know, Eric had thrown the tongue in, but it was fairly short. He didn't have a lot of the drool thing. He had some, but I get a lot of compliments for that, and I throw it back to Adam Kubert. Adam had Venom was drawing Venom in, he was teaming up with Ghost Rider and another sorcery character. I can't remember what the hell it was called, but there was this cover that Adam did where Venom's hanging upside down, and the drool is running up his face, you know, down, you know, running down across his face because he's hanging upside down. And and the tongue was there, and it was like, I went, that is a cool image. I need to do that, you know, something like that. And so that's kind of where, that's when I started really kind of, you know, throwing a lot of drool and a lot of tongue and all that good stuff in there.
Now, in the early years, Venom only appeared about once every year, and every single time you felt like Spider-Man was in mortal danger. He did everything Spidey did, but bigger and meaner.
Anything you can do, I can do better.
But Venom refused to harm anybody besides Peter Parker. He didn't harm Mary Jane or the people he thought were Peter Parker's parents. He always had a warped moral code that future writers would exploit to add layers to this character. For years, he was strictly a villain, an antagonist for Spider-Man. When Eddie and the symbiote combined, it looks like a much bigger, nastier version of Spider-Man in the black suit. Now remember, this is the late 80s and early 90s, when big, huge muscles were like really in style in comic books.
Visually, part of the reason for making him big and bulky was that the vast majority of the people that Spider-Man villains that have come up against them were kind of humanoid body shapes, right? They're sort of built like you and I, you know, with flamboyant costumes and power. To me, in its simplest form, that was Spider-Man. And this was Venom. Right? They weren't the same shape.
The sheer size of Venom meant that he always felt like an existential threat to Spider-Man. Now, Mark Bagley is my favorite Spider-Man artist of all time, and it was a huge honor to get to talk to him about Venom because he was one of the very early artists for Venom. Now, Mark Bagley and David Michelinie also created the seminal series Venom Lethal Protector, which is where Venom really comes into his own, but we'll talk about that later on. Now, Mark and David also created the second most famous symbiote in the Marvel Universe, Carnage. So we're going to get to Carnage and Lethal Protector in a bit, but first, let's get back to Eddie's relationship with the symbiote. It's really the core of who Venom is and why he's so consistently popular.
Having Todd start off with him, you know, Todd was at maybe the peak of his popularity at the time, or getting there anyway. And so that gave Venom, you know, made him a household name practically, especially in the comic book business, immediately.
Now, Eddie's definitely got his soft spots, though, and he's not necessarily a bad guy. Now, of course, we don't find out about this right away. Eddie has evolved as a character over years of comic storytelling. Now, at first, he was mostly seen as a dark mirror version of Spider-Man, basically black suit Spider-Man on steroids, and he was strictly a villain, an antagonist for the webhead. But then along came another supervillain, one that would make Venom almost look cuddly.
Taserface.
Taserface. Your name is... It's Taserface?
No, not Taserface, Carnage. Carnage is another symbiote villain who is pure malevolence. In fact, he was partly created because, as Venom became more...
Ace Hardcore, I just want to say, hail there, how you doing? Welcome to the stream. We're doing a mashup of Link from Legend of Zelda and Venom, the symbiote. So it's like, what if Link had the symbiote? That's kind of our mashup art stream today. Good to see you, man. Welcome.
more popular with fans, it became clear that Venom couldn't do all the big bad evil stuff that would turn people off. Carnage, however, could do all that evil stuff and more.
And then all of a sudden it was like they got so popular that they turned him into kind of a quasi good guy, right? Which I don't know. It wouldn't have been the way. I don't know.
Carnage is the offspring of Venom. Don't worry, we'll get to how the symbiotes reproduce in a bit. Now, when the Venom symbiote broke Eddie Brock out of prison, it left its offspring behind. So this new symbiote attaches itself to Eddie Brock's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy.
He's a serial, and he's fundamentally still a killer. He's got no sense of moral, and he's a sociopath.
Now, Cassidy had such strong willpower that, rather than bond with the symbiote, he dominated it and used it as a weapon. You can even see this dynamic in the way he speaks. Venom and Eddie always use the pronoun we, whereas Carnage says I.
You are Borg.
No, I am Hugh.
And Carnage is powerful. He quickly becomes one of the toughest villains in Spider-Man's rogues gallery. He also looks different than Venom, who mostly has a cohesive muscular form despite being made of goo. Carnage, on the other hand, is more amorphous, which makes sense given the original name that Mark and David had in mind when they created the character.
At the time, it was going to be called Chaos, and he's just going to be this out of control force of evil and make Eddie Brock look like almost like, he didn't say this, I don't think, but make Eddie Brock look like a good guy. The first sketch I came up with, which I think I have, I did the Fibonacci Man. That was called, with the guy with his arms out and the legs out, and so I basically had the red coming from his chest, like his chest was basically red, and red tendrils coming out from there and down his legs and up to his face. And I sent the sketch in, and I think Danny Fingeroth called me and said, "No, I can't do this. It looked like a shotgun wound to his chest." So I went, okay, I can't do that. So that's when I kind of came up with the idea of just these swirls all over the body, which made him a lot more difficult to draw when it came to giving him three-dimensionality, because swirls and things like that, unless they're done right, will flatten the shit out of the body, and so it made him difficult to draw well.
Now, Carnage is an incredibly important character in Venom's story. By showing what true evil looks like, it allowed Venom to start transitioning from villain to anti-hero. This basically came to pass in 1993, which saw the publication of both the seminal comic Lethal Protector, which was Venom's first solo series, and the massive crossover event Maximum Carnage.
I thought, man, it's a pretty good trick if you can take this character who's, a killer and vicious and yada yada, and turn him into a quasi good guy. People were freaked out when Spidey shook Venom's hand in that one issue. They thought, how can you do that? So, it's the worst thing Spidey's ever done, except maybe sign on with Mephisto.
So in Maximum Carnage, Venom actually allies himself with Spider-Man to stop Carnage. It was a brilliant move because fans now got to keep Venom without him becoming too evil to root for, while also getting this brand new supervillain who was unlike anything they'd seen before.
I think he appeals to a lot of people just on a basic, God, he's a badass level. He's I couldn't tell you how many times I had people ask me in the first issue he shows up, or second issue, one of the other, I don't remember. But he tosses a baby off a balcony, and Venom and Spidey both jump out to save the baby, and it turns out Venom saves him. But I've had a lot of people ask me to sign that panel or sign that page because I just thought that was so cool because it was so out there. It's kind of very, it's very metal.
Now, Venom is no Spider-Man, but he also has a moral code, and for the most part, he will not harm the innocent. He'll even go out of his way to protect innocent people, like when Carnage threw the baby. And we see this moral conscience start to emerge throughout the 6 issues of Lethal Protector, which ran right before Maximum Carnage. The series was one of the most consequential moments in Venom's history, when Marvel Comics began to transition Eddie Brock from an annually appearing Spider-Man villain and into a recurring monthly hero. He would step out from Spider-Man's shadow and no longer simply be the Dark Mirror of Spider-Man.
He is sort of the Dark Mirror in the fact that, he's a vicious killer and doesn't worry about the consequences of what he does. And Peter's got the whole with great power comes great responsibility thing, which I don't think Eddie Brock really had up until later on. Even when we started Lethal Protector, he was still, not too squeamish about squad.
Ace Hardcore said, sorry, you said you watched the Dragon in the Water stream? Oh, like last week's stream? It was amazing. Oh, thank you, man. I really listen. I super appreciate you taking the time to watch it, even if you throw it in the background and listen to it or whatnot. That really helps me out on the channel. Hopefully, you did that on YouTube because that's where it benefits me the most. Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Len. Let's continue. Where's the play?
Washing, collateral damage.
The story begins after Spider-Man and Venom come to an uneasy truce, where Venom promises to stop committing crimes and moves from New York to San Francisco.
Whatever happened to predictability?
In Lethal Protector, the Life Foundation extracts seeds from Venom to create 5 offspring symbiotes: Riot, Phage, Lasher, Agony, and Scream.
Ooh, Ice Creamville.
No, Screamville.
Each symbiote offspring bonds with a different person and has various powers, and Venom must team up with Spider-Man to stop them. Now, while this seems like a pretty straightforward story, it was notable for really solidifying Venom as a protagonist rather than as an antagonist, and for showing the character would be just as popular and interesting if he wasn't featured in a Spider-Man comic.
Yeah, but Spider-Man does show up.
Well, yeah, you gotta ease people into it, I guess, like when Picard shows up in the pilot for Deep Space Nine. Lethal Protector was also the first story to expand the symbiote mythology. Remember, when Peter found the Black Goo in Battleworld, it didn't come with an instruction book or a backstory. In Lethal Protector, we find out that symbionts produce asexually, kind of like a fungus. It's typically triggered by extreme circumstances, although it's done using fancy schmancy science by the Life Foundation. The parent symbiote doesn't feel any emotional attachment to its offspring like traditional animals do. It's like if you clipped your fingernail, you're not going to be emotionally attached to those clippings.
Especially if your fingernail became an evil baby-tossing supervillain.
Exactly. So that is how symbiotes reproduce. But where do they come from? We got a lot more backstory on the alien species in the comic book crossover Planet of the Symbionts, which came out in 1995. Eddie and Venom are having relationship troubles, basically over who should be the dominant personality. It's similar to the struggle between Banner and the Hulk that we see in Infinity War.
No! Oh, screw you, you big green asshole!
Eddie breaks up with Venom, who is so upset that he unleashes a powerful telepathic scream.
Yeah, I've been there, man. Like when they cancel Glow?
Yeah, I know, it sucked. So this scream attracts a spaceship of symbiotes to Earth, who then invade the planet, taking over randoms and wreaking havoc. Now eventually we find out that they plan to enslave the Earth, just as they've done with countless other planets. Now here we learn that the symbionts are an alien race that take over host bodies across the universe because it's the only way they can feel emotion, and they form a collective hive mind. Now the symbiotes typically consume the host body and control it as a full-on parasite. Now this is a great story development because it makes Venom unique. The Venom symbiote actually prefers to bond with its host rather than to conquer it. Venom originally came from this same pool of symbiotes in its 998th generation. The other symbiotes deemed it insane because it didn't want to use up its host, which is why they imprisoned it on Battleworld so that it would not infect their species with his "can't we all just get along" attitude. So this not only makes Venom stand out as a character, but also fleshes him out and shows just how important his relationship to Eddie Brock is.
On my planet, I am kind of a loser.
So wait, why are they called symbionts if they usually don't form symbiotic relationship with their hosts? Shouldn't they just be called parasites?
Hey, shut up. The invading force of symbionts are eventually defeated by another powerful scream that is only possible if Eddie and Venom fully bond together. Now this is a pivotal moment for the character and represents the two of them finally coming to terms with one another.
Best of both worlds.
Now by the time Planet of the Symbiotes wraps up, Venom is now fully entrenched in the Earth 616 universe as a main Marvel character and is featured in plenty of his own storylines, including Sinner Takes All, Along Came a Spider, and The Hunger. He crossovers with several non-Spidey characters like Punisher, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, and the Hulk. Now throughout this time, like all relationships, Eddie and Venom have their ups and downs. One key issue is that in a lot of ways, Venom is just bad for Eddie. Now we spoke with Ryan Stegman, one of the greatest artists to ever draw Venom, who's probably best known for creating the superior Spider-Man when Doc Ock took over the Spider-Man mantle.
Yes, I do see Eddie as a victim. The symbiote ultimately will give people what they want, and what Eddie wants is to be punished because he feels negatively about himself and the things, in his past. I don't know that the symbiote necessarily wants to hurt him all the time, but I do feel like it's feeding off of what he feels about himself.
So even as Venom is off doing his own stories in the Marvel Universe, there is always this internal conflict within the character, basically because it's really two characters. This makes Venom much more interesting to read and follow, and is probably a good reason why the character has remained popular for so long. So Venom and Eddie separate and come back together more than once, and sometimes when that happens, the Venom symbiote bonds with other characters in the Marvel Universe. This notably happens with Eddie's ex-girlfriend, Anne Wayne, who then becomes She-Venom in a dark turn and eventually dies by suicide after being traumatized by her She-Venom experience. Now, years later, we find out in a flashback that actually before that happened, she became pregnant with Eddie's son, who is also descended from the Venom symbiote. Eddie eventually finds out about his son, Dylan, and then Dylan bonds with his paternal symbiote and becomes the new Venom for a while. But again, that happens later on, so don't worry about it for now. The Venom symbiote has also bonded with Matt Gargan, aka the Scorpion, who then joined the Dark Avengers. He bonded with Flash Thompson, who then joined the Secret Avengers, as well as the Thunderbolts and even the Guardians of the Galaxy. Venom has even bonded with Malekith. Who? You know, the dark elf from Thor the Dark World that wanted everything to stay dark.
Oh yeah, I know. Markalith, that guy.
Now, don't think that just because Venom was hopping from host to host that Eddie Brock was keeping to himself. At one point, Eddie was dying of cancer, which was when Venom abandoned him for Scorpion. Eddie was then healed by Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. Now, a side effect of Mr. Negative's powers is that he altered the remnants of the symbiote in Eddie's blood, which then merged with his white blood cells, the part of your immune system that heals you, and then this created the anti-Venom symbiote. As anti-Venom, Eddie can heal people and destroy symbiotes just by touching them. He also neutralizes Spider-Man's powers when he's near him. Anti-Venom is literally the opposite of Venom, with the colors of the suit reversed. He's immune to fire and sound damage, which are Venom's weaknesses. Anti-Venom is not malicious, and he allows Eddie to go from villain to anti-hero to just being a plain old hero. Eddie is in much more control than he ever is when he's bonded with Venom. Now, unfortunately, he is forced to part with his powers to cure the spider virus, which is like a whole other thing we don't have to get into here. And also, Flash Thompson then became anti-Venom too at a later point. Now, all this was really fun. It was a cool way to play with the Venom character and pass the symbiote to other characters in the Marvel Universe. But then in 2018, a new run of Venom comics launched. Writer Donny Cates and artist Ryan Stegman then expanded the Venom mythology in the largest way since probably Planet of the Symbiotes back in 1995. The two of them created Null, one of Marvel's most powerful supervillains, and he was the creator of the symbiote race. Now, Null is an ancient godlike entity that predates even the Celestials in the creation of the Marvel Universe. Null was literally just floating around the ancient void of nothingness until the Celestials created life. So this drove Null crazy. I mean, think about it. You've got all this peace and quiet and wide open space, and then look who moves in next door. Everybody.
There is no path to goodness in him. He doesn't have a sad history. He's just pissed that his solitude was taken away from him. Null, it's like, this is just pure evil and destruction. This guy just wants to be rid of anything and everyone. I think that makes him very threatening.
Null gets his revenge by creating the All-Black, the Necro Sword, which if you've seen Thor the Dark World, you know that it can kill gods. He uses it to decapitate one of the Celestials, who then banish him from their new universe. That decapitated head, by the way, became Nowhere, which you've seen in the Guardians of the Galaxy films. So Null then took the energy from that decapitated head and used it to create the Clintar, which is where all symbionts derive from. Now remember, the symbiotes reproduce by breaking off pieces of themselves to create more symbionts. The Clintar then is the source symbiote from which all others derive, like the Great Link for the Changelings in Deep Space Nine. So Null creates a symbiote armor and starts killing deities with the Necro Sword, but then he crash lands and is taken out of service for a while. In the meantime, Gore the God Butcher finds Null, takes his gear, and then uses it to go off and butcher gods. This is all part of Jason Aaron's great run of the Thor comics. They're fantastic reads. Now, when Null wakes up, he continues his war on the gods. He sends out an army of symbiotes across the universe with himself at the center of the hive mind. The symbiotes absorb and destroy life, or as Null calls it, the light that invaded his darkness. This continues for thousands of years. During medieval times, a dragon-like symbiote attacks a Viking village in an attempt to conquer Earth. The villagers named this beast Grendel, which presumably inspires the tale of Beowulf and the really weird Robert Zemeckis movie with Crispin Glover and Angelina Jolie. Thor and the Vikings defeat Grendel, which breaks the bond between Null and the symbionts scattered across the universe. Some of the symbiotes bond with good people and become good themselves, and decide to rebel against Null. They imprison him in an artificial planet made out of billions of symbiotes, which they call Clintar, which means cage in symbiote-ese. Now, he remained in that cage for centuries until S.H.I.E.L.D. accidentally wakes him up during the Vietnam War when they use pieces of the Grendel dragon to create super soldiers. One symbiote is even temporarily bonded to Wolverine, although obviously that didn't take. Now, in Absolute Carnage, which was also penciled by Ryan Stegman, Carnage becomes more powerful than ever after bonding with a piece of Grendel. He then seeks out every Marvel character that's ever bonded with a symbiote to absorb whatever remnants they may have left. So this epic crossover involves Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Deadpool, Hulk, Iron Fist, and more more and sets up King in Black, which was also done by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman. After Venom defeats Carnage, Null finally breaks free from his prison and invades Earth, looking to restore the universe back to the darkness once and for all. So this storyline brings in the Avengers and the X-Men and even Blade, and proves that Null is a Thanos-level uber villain for the Marvel Universe. But even more than that, he is still a perfect villain for Venom specifically.
If you go back to the Eddie wanting to be punished and Null wanting to punish everybody, he is into destroying, and he wants to get back to his quiet place, but he also wants to punish everybody. He wants to make them feel, you know, sort of the anguish that he must feel by having his life disturbed, so to speak.
The story ends with Eddie also replacing Null as the center of the symbiote hive mind and as the new King in Black. With Eddie as the King in Black and the ruler of all symbiotes, his son Dylan has become the new Venom, you know, for now. And that's more or less where we are now, at least in the main Earth 616 universe. Now, of course, there are plenty of other Venom variants out there in the multiverse. Take, for example, in the Ultimate Marvel universe. Now, Ultimate Marvel was a line of different comics that ran from 2000 to 2015 that also ran alongside Earth 616. It completely rewrote and reimagined the history and characters from scratch. So the idea was that you could jump right in without needing to know decades of continuity. Now, some things in Ultimate Marvel were very similar to their Earth 616 counterparts, but a lot of things were very different. For instance, Venom. In the Ultimate Marvel universe, the Venom symbiote isn't even an alien, and all that extensive backstory with Null and the Clintar are nowhere to be found. Instead, the symbiote is a man-made biosuit invented by Eddie Brock Sr. and Richard Parker, Peter Parker's dad, and they did this to cure cancer.
Ryan's take on it was that this thing was supposed to be able to cure anything that goes wrong with you by going all over your body and that sort of thing. And apparently he didn't realize that, you know, when he gets into somebody's head, it would go crazy. I started drawing him a little bit more and more exaggerated, like it was not the anatomy of a person or anything, but it was more like this amorphous glob all over me, you know. And later on, as I went, you see like teeth growing out of different parts of his bodies, and because that can happen in tumors and things like that.
Carnage, on the other hand, isn't even the offspring of Venom. Instead, he's created by Dr. Kurt Connors, the lizard, using Peter Parker's DNA. Now, in this universe, Carnage was the one who killed Gwen Stacy, who then comes back as part symbiote. Now, other Venom variants include a T-Rex that bonds with the Venom symbiote in the Old Man Logan universe. Maybe one day we'll even see that T-Rex Venom face off against Spider-Rex. There's also Venom 2099, who is the half-brother of Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. While it's the Venom symbiote, this incarnation is very much not an anti-hero, but a dangerous, brutal villain. In a what-if story, Venom bonds with the Punisher, which just makes Punisher that much more powerful at violently killing bad guys. In Earth X, Peter Parker's daughter May bonds with the Venom symbiote to become Spider-Girl. There's also Gwenom, which is exactly what it sounds like. Venom merged with an alternate Gwen Stacy. We also see a bunch of variants in the Venomverse storyline, which sees Earth 616 Eddie Brock join with a bunch of multiverse Venoms to defeat a race of parasitic creatures called the Poisons. The Poisons can bond with and corrupt symbionts, and they're a threat to them all across the universe. Eddie defeats the Poisons with the help of variants like Venom Captain America, Venom Doctor Strange, Venom Ghost Rider, Venom Ant-Man, Venom Black Panther, and even a Venom Rocket Raccoon, which has its own Funko Pop. Another variant I just have to mention is the Venom of Earth 92131. Now, this is the same universe as the amazing recent series X-Men 97, and of course, Spider-Man the Animated Series, which ran from 1994 to 1998. This Saturday morning cartoon was airing while Venom was at his most popular point in the comics, and it really helped solidify the character in pop culture. The opening titles to the show even ended each week with Venom's big, gross tongue. This Venom was similar to the one in the comics, and was a symbiote that bonded to Eddie Brock after Spider-Man rejected it. However, rather than finding it on Battleworld, the symbiote arrived on Earth after J. Jonah Jameson's son crash-landed a NASA space shuttle onto the George Washington Bridge. Now, since it was a TV show for kids and not a drawn-out comic storyline, the beats of Peter finding the symbiote, wearing the black suit, rejecting it, and Venom bonding with Eddie all happen a lot quicker than they do in the comics.
That's funny. I give up too. I give up trying to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
But this version of the character is really important because it introduced him to many Spider-Man fans who didn't even read the comics, especially younger ones.
Say aloha!
Also, since this was a kid's cartoon, Carnage, who does appear in the animated series, is toned down from his murderous serial killer origins, although he's still plenty scary.
Think of the damage we can do now, man!
In Earth 92131, Carnage is still the offspring of Venom and still bonds to Cletus Cassidy, but the two of them are actually brought together by Baron Mordo, under orders of Dormammu. This symbiote also appears as Spider Carnage in the series finale of the animated series, and a really emotional ending. So the series finale of the cartoon famously has Madam Web bring about several different versions of Spider-Man to form a multiversal team. Spider Carnage is an alternate Peter Parker that merged with the Carnage symbiote. Now, in the end, these Spider-Men defeat Spider Carnage by showing him an alt-universe Uncle Ben who never died, who reminds him that there's still good within him.
And no matter what, I love you.
I love you too, Uncle Ben. This Spider Carnage then sacrifices himself to save the multiverse. Now, in addition to this animated version of Venom, another version I should mention is the one from the PS5 game Marvel Spider-Man 2, because he played such an important role in the story. Not only that, but the story gives us one of the most different takes on Venom we've ever seen in a mainstream Spider-Man adaptation. For one thing, Eddie Brock is not in the game at all. The symbiote arrives from space via a meteor, kind of like it does in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. It's discovered by Kurt Connors, who's working for Norman Osborn, and then the two of them use the symbiote to treat Harry Osborn's Osh-Torrin syndrome. So this gives Harry Venom-like powers, and Harry briefly uses it to be a superhero alongside Peter and Miles Morales. However, the symbiote attaches itself to Peter because it senses that he is much more powerful, and this is how Spider-Man gets his black suit in this universe, kind of in the reverse order that we usually see. Now, the black suit makes Peter more aggressive, and at first he's really drawn in by his enhanced powers. In fact, the game features one of the biggest jump scares I've ever seen in Spider-Man history.
We need to destroy it. Destroy us?
Eventually, though, Peter does resist the symbiote, and then it rebonds with Harry to become this universe's Venom. The game also briefly gives us its version of Scream when Venom's offspring bonds with Mary Jane. So the PlayStation game's Elseworld take on Spider-Man has been really cool over the course of 3 games, showing us a similar yet different cinematic take on the characters, similar to what the Arkham games have done for Batman. So it's kind of a bummer that we don't get to see this universe's take on Eddie Brock, but making Harry Osborn Venom makes a lot of sense. These games have a lot less time to tell the Spider-Man story than the comics or the animated series. So by condensing the Black Suit storyline with characters that already have a personal connection to Peter, namely Harry, Norman, and Kurt Connors, it's a really smart move. Now, it'll be interesting to see what this story does with Carnage, who was teased in the game alongside Cletus Cassidy, who in this dimension is a cult leader instead of a serial killer. Now, Venom and Carnage also played big roles in another Spider-Man video game adaptation, which was just called Spider-Man, and came out in 2000 for the original PlayStation, as well as the Sega Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, and a few other platforms. This game's take on Venom was pretty standard, although notably the symbiote was dark blue and not black. It also leaned into how silly and fun Eddie as Venom can be, annoying Spider-Man as the two of them are forced to work together.
We're going to use his computer database.
Ooh, are we gonna surf the web?
Let's just go.
But going way back, another game worth mentioning is Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage, which was a side-scroller on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Now, while the game itself is simple, it has a cool story that pretty loyally adapts the story from Maximum Carnage comic books, with Spidey and Venom fighting Carnage alongside many other superheroes. The game also features Shriek, Carrion, Doppelganger, who is a 6-armed clone of Spider-Man, very long story, and Demogoblin, a demon-possessed, super powerful hobgoblin. In fact, I bet a lot of you watching this actually saw ads for this video game in your schools. It was a weird thing. They advertised the video game in schools. Now, the game also had a sequel that even more closely adapted Lethal Protector, but for some reason was called Venom Spider-Man Separation Anxiety. The main reason I mention these games is that they came out in 1994 and 95, during the initial height of Venom's popularity. It showed just how quickly this character took off, getting not 1 but 2 games just a few years after he was introduced in the comics. This also explains why many fans were chomping at the bit for a Venom adaptation on the big screen, which didn't take place until the 3rd Spider-Man movie in 2007. However, even that didn't almost happen, as Sam Raimi, who directed the entire Tobey Maguire trilogy, wasn't all that interested in a Venom storyline. Now, Spider-Man 2 is a huge success and is still considered one of, if not the greatest superhero movie ever made, so like a 3rd film was a given. Sam Raimi and his brother Ivan wrote up a story with Sandman as the primary villain, because Raimi thought that it would be really cool to see on the screen visually.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of Anakin Skywalker, because he loves sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse, rough, and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Right, so the story wanted to have Peter grapple with what it means to be a vigilante, and for him to discover the humanity and the criminals that he faced. Sandman was retconned to have been the one to have killed Uncle Ben in order for Peter to truly learn about forgiveness. Now, Raimi did think another villain could fit into the story pretty well, and Ben Kingsley was even involved in negotiations to play the Vulture. However, producer Avi Arad insisted that Raimi include Venom because he was so popular and sold a lot of toys. But Raimi was resistant because he didn't have a personal affinity for the character, having grown up with Spider-Man comics before the symbiote ever showed up. He also didn't see any humanity in the character, but once he started working on the character because his boss told him to, he found Venom to have more depth than he realized. Now, interestingly, Eddie Brock was already a minor character in the script. More interestingly, the seeds for Venom were kind of already planted in Spider-Man 2, which features J. Jonah Jameson's son as an astronaut. Remember that in the animated series, the symbiote arrives from space when Jameson crashes his shuttle onto the GW bridge, which would have been a great special effects spectacle for Raimi's film. However, instead, they opted for the symbiote to randomly crash land on Earth as a meteor with absolutely no backstory, kind of similar to what it does in the PS5 video game. The symbiote then just attaches to Peter, likely sensing his power. It shows how, by cramming Venom into an already fleshed out story, there wasn't really room to do this story justice, and everything just felt rushed. So we do get a black suit arc for Spider-Man, where Peter's behavior is corrupted by the symbiote, but it barely lasts for one act of the film. It did, however, famously give us Evil Toby, which was mostly just dancing.
We don't really talk about this.
And nearly killing Harry Osborn. Eddie Brock was played by Topher Grace and is portrayed as kind of a scuzzy tabloid photographer, a mirror version of Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. Instead of the big lug with the heart of gold that Eddie is usually depicted as, he's more smarmy and sarcastic.
What was it you said? I'll never get that picture? There's your hero.
Again, showing him to be a dark side of the Peter Parker from the Raimi films. Now, similar to the comics, Peter rejects the symbiote using sound waves, and then the hostless symbiote bonds with Eddie to become Venom. Also similar to the comics, Venom hates Spider-Man because both Eddie and the symbiote hate Spider-Man. This version of Eddie Brock's career was ruined when Peter Parker exposed him for publishing fake Spider-Man photos that showed him robbing a bank. Now, we don't really get to see much of Venom in this movie, which still mostly focuses on Sandman and the New Goblin. Now remember too that the CGI used to make Venom was still in its early days and very expensive. Raimi's version of Venom is less burly than what we usually get, similar to how this version of Eddie is more toned down and making him look more like an actual dark mirror of Spider-Man. Instead of a deep, growly voice, it's also more shrieky and animal-like.
Never wound what you can't kill.
Which does fit the chaotic nature of the tendrils. In the end, Spider-Man uses sound waves and fire from a pumpkin bomb to destroy the symbiote. Now, a lot of fans were disappointed that, even though they finally got Venom on the big screen, it wasn't the Venom they expected, and that he only showed up for a few minutes of screen time. There were hopes that he would return in Spider-Man 4, maybe alongside Carnage, but obviously a fourth Tobey Maguire movie didn't happen. Yet.
They stole it from me, Carmine! They took it! That was today! Today!
6 years after Spider-Man 3, we got another take on Venom in an interesting unofficial fan film. Now, this short film is called Truth in Journalism, and it was shot in black and white. It was written and directed by Adi Shankar, who made other unofficial short films like Power Rangers and Dirty Laundry, in which Thomas Jane returned to play the Punisher. Now, the film is shot as a low-budget documentary by French filmmakers in the 1980s, showing the life of Eddie Brock, played by True Blood's Ryan Quanten. Eddie is portrayed as a disgraced and cold-hearted, unhinged journalist, and it's strongly hinting that he moonlights as a vigilante. In one scene, we briefly see him transform into Venom and kill the film crew. Interestingly, Eddie can't immediately transform, but has to concentrate and violently cough up the symbiote to transform. There isn't any backstory about the symbiote or if Venom is a distinct personality, although we see it uses tendrils and has the big, long tongue. And Bullseye makes a cameo near the end. It's a fun little film that's worth mentioning as yet another take on this character. And that brings us to, of course, the Tom Hardy Venom films, the trilogy of Sony movies that finally put Venom front and center on the big screen. And when I say finally, I mean because Marvel had been trying to make this movie happen for more than 20 years before Venom was finally released in 2018. David S. Goyer, who's written Batman Begins and Blade, had written a Venom script all the way back in 1997 that was to be produced by New Line Cinema. Carnage was the villain, and Dolph Lundgren, who already played the Punisher, was in talks to star as Eddie Brock. I mean, the guy is really huge and blonde, so I could definitely see it. Now, the film obviously never happened, and for a while, Sony thought about doing a spin-off Venom film with Topher Grace after Spider-Man 3. Now, this finally fell apart when Spider-Man was rebooted with Andrew Garfield, although interest was renewed in a Venom film after The Amazing Spider-Man started to perform well. Now, at one point, big fan director Robert Siegel and Chronicle director Josh Trank pitched an R-rated film in the vein of Jim Carrey's The Mask. Now, if you've seen Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, you probably think it's for the best that this also never happened. said.
I've been traumatized.
Now, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 famously set up the Sinister Six, and Sony was intent on making a wider cinematic Sonyverse that would compete with the MCU. They planned for a film called Venom Carnage to be featured in this Amazing Verse, and it was to be written by Alex Kurtzman, Robert Orci, and Ed Solomon. Now, the plan was for that to come out after Amazing 3, but it was pushed up after Amazing 2 bombed hard. However, plans changed again once Kevin Feige and Disney negotiated to bring another rebooted Spider-Man into the MCU and to share the rights with the character with Sony. This is when Sony planned to make yet another cinematic universe independent of both the MCU and the Andrew Garfield Amazing Verse. Based on the success of R-rated films like Deadpool and Logan, Sony considered a darker R-rated movie, and its shortlisted filmmakers included Andrew Wingard, who went on to make Death Note and the Godzilla vs. Kong movies, and they also considered Adi Shankar, the writer of the black and white Venom fan film. Finally, Zombieland director Ruben Fleischer, who was a big fan of the comics, landed the role as director. Now, Tom Hardy was brought on to play Eddie Brock in Venom. He had to drop out of Suicide Squad for Venom, with Joel Kinnaman taking his place as Rick Flag. Hardy said a big reason for taking the role was because his son was a huge Venom fan, although I'm sure that $7 million paycheck didn't hurt. Riz Ahmed was cast as the film's villain, Carlton Drake, although Matt Smith and Pedro Pascal were both considered. Now, Pascal was well known, but he wasn't the gigantic star that he is today. Matt Smith, though, is interesting to note because he later became the main antagonist in Morbius, the second franchise in the SSU.
The SSU?
Yes, it's short for Sony's Spider-Man universe. That's the new cinematic universe that began with Venom. Since Spider-Man was busy making MCU films, Sony instead decided to focus on various Spidey-adjacent characters that it still retained the rights to, giving each character its own film. Now, eventually, Sony hopes to cross all of these characters over, which we'll talk about in a bit. So far, the SSU films include the Venom trilogy, Morbius, Madam Web, and the Craven film that's been in the can for a while but keeps getting delayed. Now, at first, it was a little unclear where exactly these films fit in with relation to the MCU, but that eventually got sorted out in Spider-Man No Way Home. Ruben Fleischer wanted to make sure the tone of the film felt distinct from both the MCU and the grimdark DC extended universe. He also felt that in order to effectively portray Venom, you had to go with an R rating to show how violent he could be. You know, what with biting off people's heads and such. However, Sony ended up getting cold feet and insisted the film be PG-13. Supposedly, this was because they wanted to leave the door open for crossing over with the more family-friendly MCU Spider-Man. Now, the film that we got with Ruben Fleischer and Tom Hardy came out in 2018, and it borrows a lot from the comics, including Lethal Protector and Planet of the Symbiotes. It takes place in San Francisco, and the Life Foundation plays a large role. Michelle Williams plays Anne Wayne, and she does bond with the symbiote briefly in the film, but she doesn't really become She-Venom. Like with other adaptations, this origin story completely leaves out Battleworld. Spider-Man doesn't seem to exist in this universe, or at least he's not a known figure, and there is no Black Suit storyline. Instead, the symbionts are discovered in space by the Life Foundation and then brought back to Earth. Now, while it doesn't really matter much, J. Jonah Jameson's astronaut son also appears in the film. Riz Ahmed's character eventually bonds with the Riot symbiote, which was introduced in Lethal Protector and serves as the main villain of the film. A lot of CGI was used for both symbionts, which allowed the film to portray Venom as he was in the comics, a huge, burly beast. Tom Hardy also voices Venom, which makes sense. I mean, after all, he does have a penchant for creating unique voices for comic book villains.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark.
Now, Hardy plays Venom as a gruff but playful monster, and he plays Eddie as awkward, humble, and a well-meaning journalist. But it's a unique take on the character that still doesn't feel too different from the source material. The best parts of the movie are the dynamic between Eddie and Venom, both played by Hardy as a sort of schizophrenic, superpowered odd couple. Hardy accomplished this by recording Venom's lines first and then listening to them in an earpiece that he was wearing. Also, while the film is PG-13, it does a pretty good job of portraying Venom's brutality. Now, obviously, with Venom as the lead, he is the protagonist, and the Venom trilogy leans into the character's anti-hero status, rather than making him a full-on villain. Venom defeats Riot, and the film ends with Venom and Eddie coming to a truce and remaining secretly bonded to fight crime as San Francisco's new Lethal Protector. The film also ends with Eminem's single Venom rapping over the credits. So if you ever wanted to hear Eminem make Venom rhyme with adrenaline and momentum, then we got a song for you.
Yeah, Sony should have used my Venom rap song. Goes like this. Hey, my name is Venom, and I'm here to say my goo is black and my morals are gray.
Yeah, buddy, but you're under NDA. You're not supposed to talk about that.
Alright, cheese.
Besides Eminem, we also got a mid-credits scene that introduced Woody Harrelson as serial killer Cletus Cassidy, teasing Carnage for a sequel. Now fortunately, unlike a lot of post-credits teasers these days,
Blade and Star Fox and Hercules,
Venom 2 did indeed feature Carnage. In fact, the movie was called Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and it came out in 2021. Now while reviews of the first film were mixed, it made nearly $1 billion, so the sequel was pretty much fast-tracked. Ruben Fleischer said he wanted to save Carnage for the sequel, so the first film could focus on Eddie and Venom's dynamic, which was a smart choice. He also said that it gave the franchise room to grow in the next film, similar to how Christopher Nolan saved the Joker for his second Batman film. Woody Harrelson was also really smart casting. He had previously worked with Fleischer on Zombieland, and Fleischer said Woody's role in Natural Born Killers as a sadistic serial killer already had him in mind for the role of Cletus Cassidy. Ironically though, Fleischer had to drop out of directing the sequel because he was already shooting Zombieland 2. So then they brought on Andy Serkis. Now Andy Serkis is mostly known for his acting, especially his groundbreaking motion capture acting. He's played Gollum, King Kong, Caesar, and while he's played Snoke, he also appeared in live action on Andor to deliver one of the greatest lines in the Star Wars franchise.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Sorry, I meant this line. Now, Andy Serkis helped develop mocap acting into an art form, which is why it made sense for him to direct Venom 2, since both Venom and Carnage were CGI characters. This was the second film he directed after Mowgli, Legend of the Jungle. Ironically, however, Serkis decided not to use mocap for Venom, saying that it allowed more freedom for Tom Hardy to play the character. Since Venom is gigantic and doesn't really match Tom Hardy's frame 1-to-1, full CGI was also more practical. However, dancers and actors were used for some motion capture. Serkis said that he wanted to depict Venom as a quarterback who used brute force, and Cletus as an octopus that had idiosyncratic off-kilter movements. Now at this point, Joker had become another huge R-rated comic book success, so Sony briefly considered making Venom 2 rated R, but then decided to not rock the boat. It made a lot of money as a PG-13 film, so there was no reason to mess with that formula. Like the comics, the film portrays Cletus Cassidy as a serial killer in prison. He bites Eddie and is introduced to the symbiote offspring in this way, which manifests as Carnage just as he's being put to death. The film also focuses on the relationship between Cletus and Frances Barrison, played by Naomi Harris, who were also romantically involved in the comics. As in the comics, Frances is also Shriek, a mutant with sonic-based powers. She allies herself with Carnage in the book Maximum Carnage, but in the movie, they are childhood sweethearts who grew up in an orphanage together before being separated for years. As Carnage, he reunites with Shriek and they go on a rampage together. Meanwhile, Eddie and Venom have gone their separate ways because Venom wants to eat the criminals that they catch. Eventually, they do reunite to stop Carnage, which they do by using Shriek's sonic powers to separate Cletus from the symbiote before they kill them both. Shriek is also killed when the church they're in collapses from the battle. Another character, Detective Patrick Mulligan, is seemingly killed in the climax by Carnage. However, at the end, it's revealed that he has glowing blue eyes and it's likely he is bonded with Toxin, the symbiote offspring of Carnage that first debuted in comics in 2004. Now, Venom: The Last Dance features the King in Black himself, Null, creator of the symbionts, as its main villain. Now, as for Venom, it's kind of unclear what's going to happen next. The film is called The Last Dance, and the marketing seems to heavily imply that this is it. This is the finale for the Venom trilogy. Even though Morbius and Madam Web were flops, Sony still seems intent on making its SS universe a thing, and you can't do a big crossover movie without Venom at its center. And there's also the multiverse factor. The post-credits scene of Let There Be Carnage shows Eddie and Venom taking a vacation to a tropical bar. Suddenly, he's warped to another dimension and sees Tom Holland's Spider-Man on the news. So this was an incredibly exciting tease because it made it seem like Tom Hardy was going to be Venom in Spider-Man No Way Home. That movie also teased 5 different villains in its marketing: Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Sandman, Electro, and the Lizard. Spider-Man famously fights a group of villains called the Sinister Six, so it made a lot of sense that Venom was secretly the 6th villain. However, once the movie came out, we realized that that wasn't the case, and that Spider-Man was indeed only fighting 5 villains. Tom Hardy literally sits at the bar throughout the entire events of the movie, and then is sent back to his dimension when Doctor Strange undoes the spell that brought him there in the first place. Basically, Venom's cameo in the MCU was a one-off joke.
No, we just got here! No, not again!
But another connection to the multiverse is convenience store owner Mrs. Chen, who appears in all 3 Venom films. Played by Peggy Lou, Mrs. Chen is friends with both Eddie and Venom, and is hilariously nonchalant about there being a giant symbiote monster living in the neighborhood.
Good evening, Venom.
He says hi.
She also appears as a cameo in live action in Sony's animated Across the Spider-Verse film. Again, she's nonchalant about the Spot suddenly entering her dimension.
You're acting like weird stuff like this happens to you all the time.
Funny enough, the gum the Spot takes in that scene is called Venom Mint. It's also cool that a Venom character appears in the Spider-Verse franchise because Miles Morales' black suit, in a way, is a spiritual successor to the original 1980 Spider-Man suit that started the whole Venom saga. Mrs. Chen's cameo is also another way to show that literally all Marvel properties inhabit the same multiverse, along with Fox's X-Men and Deadpool movies, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, Sony's SSU, and of course, Disney's MCU. With the MCU headed toward a multiversal epic film in Avengers Secret Wars, that means that Venom could easily show up alongside the Avengers, Deadpool, the X-Men, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Even if Tom Hardy doesn't appear in Secret Wars, I think it's still very likely Tom Holland will face off against Venom at some point. Now, it's unclear exactly how Sony will work Spider-Man into their SSU, but with the way the MCU has worked the multiverse saga into its canon, it wouldn't be that difficult to do. Venom has had one of the most incredible arcs of any character in the comics, beginning as an idea written by a fan, that then grew into a way to keep creators from claiming copyright on a character, that then became one of Spider-Man's seminal storylines, and finally became one of his greatest arch-enemies. Marvel Comics took a huge swing when they turned Venom from villain into anti-hero, but great creators over the years have added so much depth to his character that different artists and different media have been inspired by this character ever since. So no matter if it's going to be Tom Hardy or some other actor, I know that Venom isn't going to go anywhere. Well guys, that's the definitive history of Venom. Was there anything we should have talked about that we left out? Let us know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And big shout out to the writer of this video, Jack Picone. You can find his social links below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
Wow, guys. Yeah, that was a pretty good in-depth version of Venom. My goodness. Ooh. Hopefully you learned something along the way with this. I know there's a lot of knowledge that we go out there. I got reminded about a lot of stuff too. Right on. Okay. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. We're continuing on. We've pretty much, I think, nailed a lot of the aspects of this. No, it's just like I drooled the whole time. In the spirit of Mr. Venom, yes. Yes. I'm I'm happy with the how this kind of came out. I'm debating on if I want to put a color in the background or not. I did talk about that smoke though, and I kind of think I want to do that. I still want to have kind of some sort of maybe the hint of background. We could do something subtle. As you guys know, I like using mixed media a fair bit. So I've combined ink, I've combined pencil crayon, alcohol markers. I'm a fan of kind of mixing it up, right? Yet, still trying to maintain that comic look. So how am I going to do this? Let's see. What do I want to have as... So, do I do a color? Thinking about it. I think what I might want to do is do some sort of let's see what we can do here. Let me grab a tissue. And we're just gonna experiment a little bit, just a little bit, with having some color in the background here. Just gonna do a little bit of that, and have it kind of like the wind is blowing. I want the wind to blow. motion going. Get that motion coming around. Just subtle. I think just to almost create our own little vignette, so to speak. I'm just going to do the top corner here. Super subtle. And maybe the other corner as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take maybe a blue. Is it going to be too much? Just a hint. Just a hint. When I spray a workable fixative on it, it will actually get sealed to the paper. Cool. I'm actually pretty pleased with how this kind of has come out, to be honest. I hope the client will be pleased as well. I'm sure they will be. I did struggle a little bit with, pondering how I would approach this drawing, because I've never thought about how to combine these two characters together. I hope it reads as a Venom infused Link. Am I going to keep the drawing? Oh, Saphira, this is a commission. This is someone paid me to draw this. It's a gift for her husband, and for his birthday. So yeah. So she kind of commissioned me. I was pressed for time, so I was like, you know what? I'll do my art stream and I'll do the commission on the stream. So. This stream is not an art giveaway stream. However, next week I will be returning with another art giveaway. So you guys definitely will be able to get in. That's why there's no magic word today. Sorry about that, guys. Normally I do the commission stuff not on stream, but this particular person kind of didn't mind it being drawn live, so definitely helps. I'm gonna have to also cut off commissions by, I think, mid-October, in order for, if you want it done for Christmas. I can only do so many. Otherwise I just get bogged down. I have no time to do them. So if you're thinking of an idea or something like that, you want it by Christmas, do try to get in contact with me, before, let's say before the end of October. Cool. Can I go a little bit bolder there? Yeah, probably. Let's just do a little bit more sky. Just building it up slowly. A lot of times, it's like building things in layers. Same thing with pencil crown. You need to build things in layers slowly. I kind of like the stark brightness, right? just trying to think if there's anything else here. Take the pen. Where'd my pen go? Where'd my pen go? Okay. Not bad, not bad. Add a little bit more darkness to this. It stands out. Nice. Kind of like those kind of little tendrils, like it's reaching out. We're right now kind of seeing the process of him first getting the symbiote. I think that's kind of cool. I like the fact that it's going to you can almost imagine that it's going to create the rest of the sword using the symbiote as its body, as its blade or something like that. Or super powering it up or something. I don't know. A little bit of glow from the Triforce on the sword, on the shield, and the eyes. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that's come out. Nice. So, just before we finish, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the tape off this thing. Got the bottom layer off. And then, what's next? Which one? I think the top layer. This little guy's in the way. Oh my gosh. Little Link. I love the pixel art. So cool. Go. There we go. Now, I don't know if you guys can see, but I put a little before taping the stuff down, I put a little design element on each corner, kind of mirroring the design element inside Link's outfit, just to kind of make it a nice frame. And you can see how by adding the bit of Conte, you've got that thing of like, okay, look, it's not perfectly white. There's the sky and horizon. Even though it is white, I like that stark background. It's very comic booky, right? It's. Let me show you guys. See, like in the top corner, little designs. It's almost like a cover. You can put a title up here. Link. All right. Awesome. Well, yeah. Normally around this time, would be when we do our art giveaway, right? But unfortunately, this one is paid for already in advance. It's not the first time we've done this. We've, anytime there's, someone wants to buy it outright while we're even doing it, that's happened a few times. And then we've also got, we try to do commissions. We do get permission though from the people that want to commission me to do something. But sometimes people want that private. They don't want it drawn live. But hey, I think it's kind of cool to see the process and how it's made, right? Awesome. I hope you were entertained by the edutainment today. If only it were a game or a movie as well. Oh yeah, that'd you know, that's only if Disney buys Nintendo, right? I had a dream about that once, that I was like, Disney owns my entire childhood. They own the Muppets. they own like, you know, Tron, Dark Crystal, like, you know, all these things that I grew up on as a kid. And man, if they buy Nintendo, then that's pretty much it. That's my childhood right there. They own me. Oh man. I don't know. You never know, right? It's all about the dollar value at the end of the day. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Okay. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. All right. I don't know. When blending these two characters, I often ask myself, what is the essence of each? For Link, I think it's heroism, his courage, his kind of iconic, almost silhouette sometimes. For Venom, it's chaos, raw strength, and a fluid of organic shapes. Symbiote should always feel alive, right? So I'm trying to draw the tendrils, you know, have like they have their own will. You know, light behaves differently on the armor versus the symbiote. I try to kind of do that with a little bit of glistening. You know, one is matte, one is kind of glossy, right? So contrast is what makes this mashup pop, essentially. Yeah. So I guess one could think about it as in, like, what if the symbiote is boosted, or boosted by, like, Link's... What if the symbiote boosted his courage, right? I don't know. I kind of try to imagine the you know, the character inside a game. You know, what if the symbiote was like something to fight against a boss mechanic, right? Anyways, guys, if you stuck with me here, creatively, mashups are a great way of getting unstuck. If you draw stuff yourself, dreaming up a mashup is kind of an easy way, because you know what each character looks like, and you can kind of mash them together and kind of create something new. You know, you never know. You combine them and you get to see what happens. Don't ever wait for the perfect idea, though. Start with a sketch and let it evolve. Let creation be your iteration, right? I always forget. I'm thinking over there. The camera's up here. My God. I'm like looking over there at the camera. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry, the light is also bright, so I put my sunglasses on. Oh my gosh. Guys. Awesome. Let me, there. Now I'm on the right camera. There we have it, guys. Link empowered by Venom. The Venom Symbiote. You know, the fusion of courage and chaos, right? This one was an honor to create. I hope the commissioner and her husband enjoyed it as much as I did making it. Thank you again to Game Nerd Legacy and Screen Crush for letting us geek out with their amazing videos. And thank you guys for hanging out tonight. You're part of the adventure every time you watch, you chat, and even create alongside me. Remember, don't wait for that perfect moment to draw. Pick up a pencil, explore crazy meshes, and let the process teach you like it's taught me. Until next time, may all your hits be criticals and your art adventures legendary. We'll see you guys on the next one, alright? Next time.